around this region that came in to express their opinions. We're happy to see all of you coming to the university, and welcome and good luck to your work. And as I said before, if there's anything that we can do to accommodate you, to help you, please let us know.
Thank you. Don't be surprised if we don't ask you to host another meeting either the last week of September or first week of October.
We'll be very happy to do that.
Thank you. I know there are many dignitaries in the audience, and I'm probably going to miss some, but I'm going to give it a shot. I see Senator Souls. Thank you for joining us. Senator Papen, thank you for joining us. And I want to give you special thanks for all of the work you did for the behavioral health services in New Mexico. You were instrumental in allowing me to negotiate a settlement with all the providers, and hopefully we are getting back on track to providing valuable services to that community.
Mr. Chair, we have Senator Crystal Diamond here with us today.
Excellent. Yes, feel free to help me out. The Mayor Pro Tem is here, is that right? Ms. Candera? Yes. Welcome. Chief Deputy County Clerk Lindsay Bachman. We have somebody from the school district, maybe? No? Okay. All right. Did I miss anybody?
Yes, Justice Chavez, we have some folks on Zoom as well.
Okay. Yes, I know we have former Representative John Eaton, who will, when we get to public input, he will go first. Yes, sir.
Chair, we have the chair of the Regions of New Mexico University right here.
Thank you very much.
I also see Senator Hal Pope in the Zoom audience as well.
Senator Pope?
Yes.
Senator Pope in the Zoom. Anybody else? Well, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. We've done our roll call now. I'd like for each member of the committee to introduce themselves to you so that you will know a little bit about our background and why it is we likely were appointed to serve in this capacity. Why don't we start with you, Mr. Salcedo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to be home. Christopher Salcedo, I grew up about 10 miles south in a small community called El Cerro. NMSU, though, has been my second home, if you will, my entire life. I graduated in '94. And quite frankly, it's just always a joy to be here, which is why serving as regent is such an honor for me. So other than, of course, the Citizen Redistricting Commission, I am a regent for New Mexico State. I have lived in Albuquerque, though, for about 25 years. I've been practicing law that time. I have a firm that does mostly litigation. My wife is an educator. My son starts a junior high school tomorrow. So that's pretty much my life right now, other than the redistricting commission. So with that, I've talked to a few of you about what we have already learned today. So I thought I'd just share that as well, because I encourage everyone here to speak. This process has been so educational for me personally, and because of that, it's really going to help us do our job, and frankly, do our job to hopefully the satisfaction of the citizens. So thank you for being here. I look forward to hearing your comments. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Ryan Cangelosi. I'm a native New Mexican, born and raised in Albuquerque. I love being here. I'm a Lobo, but my older brother is an Aggie, and so we have a rivalry in our house all the time. And my father went to NMSU as well, so I'm kind of outnumbered. I work for the University of New Mexico in the health sciences area. I'm the Director of Economic and Community Development. Before working at UNM, I've been there 9 years. I worked for Governor Susana Martinez as her Deputy Chief of Staff, and I worked also as the chair of the Republican Party of New Mexico for one cycle in 2018. I've loved being a part of this process. It's been so wonderful traveling the state We were up north in Las Vegas. We were in Roswell yesterday. We've been traveling everywhere in Farmington and Albuquerque. And one thing that I'm just reminded that, one, we have the most beautiful state geographically. Driving has just been amazing. But the most important thing is all of the people that we've met from up north to down south were New Mexicans. I think we have the best states in our country, and I'm very grateful to be a part of this first redistricting commission because this is really about the citizens of New Mexico and making sure that we do things in a correct way, in a nonpartisan way, so that people have representation. And so I also want to thank, as Justice Chavez has thanked our elected officials for being here. Yesterday, we had a lot of legislators in Roswell, and I want to remind people that these legislators are not paid to be your legislator. They do it voluntarily, and they put a ton of time into it, and they also have full-time jobs. And so they're now coming and being a part of this redistricting because it's so important to them, not their own districts, but just in general throughout the state, making sure that things are done in such a way that people have representation up in Santa Fe. And so it's been a great honor being on this committee with two former senators, Ms. Curtis and Michael Sanchez, and them committing this time to this as well because they're committed to the state of New Mexico. So thank you very much for being here today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Curtis. I am the mother of 4, grandmother of 3. I, like Ryan, I am outnumbered. Both my sisters, Nina and Laura, went to New Mexico State. My brother went to New Mexico State. My son went to New Mexico State. My husband went to New Mexico State. I am the only low voter. And so I have spent a lot of time on this campus all my adult life. I am a trial lawyer, went to the University of New Mexico. I've been a trial lawyer for almost 30 years. I represented people in Las Cruces in this area specifically and all across the state for almost 30 years. I did have a short stint in the legislature, which is interesting to see the way things work behind the doors. Most importantly, the philosophy of this committee, I think, is very important. We made a decision early that we are not judges. We are not the deciders for what's going to happen. Ultimately, the citizens are the ones that give us input that we listen to for the way that the district should be drawn. This is different for our state. The concept of everyone having a voice, one person, one vote. We've been schooled on the law. We have attorneys. We've been through trainings. We really, really want to do a good job, but most importantly, we want to hear from you. We're going to ask you specifics. Okay, we want to know where your community of interest is, where it starts and ends, why it's a community of interest. We have laws, Voting Rights Act that have to be followed. And so we have to fit all this stuff in. So please, tell us what you need, what you want, and why. And thank you all so much for being here.
Michael Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean, my mother wanted me to come to New Mexico State. She loved Purvis Atkins for some strange reason. That was a long time ago, but I didn't make it. So sorry I didn't make it. I still love the school. But my name is Michael Sanchez. I was born and raised in Belen. Graduated from high school in Belen. I attended UNM undergraduate school and UNM law school. I am an attorney. I've been practicing for, I find figured it out, at least 40 some years, and I'm still trying to learn how to do it. I think that's why they call it practice. I've been married longer than I've been practicing law. Actually, I will have my 52nd anniversary here on August 30th. My wife also is from Belen. We were actually preschool sweethearts way back when. And I got lucky, and I'm lucky she has put up with me for all these years. I have 3 adult children, 2 attorneys, and one in the restaurant business. I have two of my children living here in New Mexico and the other in Illinois. I have four wonderful grandchildren. And I'll tell you, you never know what life is like until you have grandkids. It's just been something that has made an enormous difference in my life. I also served a little time in the New Mexico State Legislature, where I met some wonderful individuals that are in this room and that are not in this room. And I think we have one of the most diverse legislatures in the country. And I think that at times they work well together. At other times, it doesn't seem like it, but we do seem to get things done. And I'd also like to comment about the committee members as well. I knew 3 of the 4 committee members before. Mr. Salcido, I did not know before, although I think we had met on occasion, but all these committee members are committed to doing what the legislature asked us to do. And I know there was at a time that early on, I got a call from someone who has some Democratic leanings and indicated, well, how can you work with somebody who was in Susana Martinez's administration? And for those who don't know, Mr. Cangliosi and I are close friends, and we have a very good working relationship, and I respect and admire everything he's done, especially for the University of New Mexico. We had some political differences, but that doesn't mean anything. We are still friends, and we are going to work to try to complete this task as best we can. So thank you all for being here today. We look forward to your testimony. And Brian and your staff, thank you for all you've done, because it's a yeoman's job, and you've really helped us as the committee and explaining to the public exactly what this is all about. So thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Radigan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our hosts at New Mexico State. I do want to point out that I've done my share of Zoom meetings over the last year and a half. They're exceptionally hard to get good audio, video in a large room like that, and you have done an exceptional job. I can see everybody and hear everybody as crystal clear as ever, and I want to acknowledge that. I also want to ask somebody from the committee could please grab the New Mexico State swag bag, because I really want one of those. So if somebody could bring one of those back to Albuquerque for me, I would really appreciate it. I have a lot of love for New Mexico State and for Southern New Mexico, but I am here in my office at UNM, where I serve as the Director of Geospatial and Population Studies. I've worked here for about 8 years as the state demographer and liaison to the United States Census Bureau. And so I've been working on behalf of all of New Mexico throughout the decennial census cycle. In 2018, I was appointed by Governor Martinez to serve as the state liaison to the Local Update of Census Addresses Program, or LUCA. And more recently, in 2019, I served on Governor Lujan Grisham's Complete Count Commission, which is a broad nonpartisan coalition that worked to motivate every New Mexican to respond to the 2020 census. And I want to acknowledge the work of Doña Ana County Commissioner Manuel Sanchez, who served on that commission with me. And I also want to acknowledge Liz Reed, who's the Community and Constituent Services Manager with Doña Ana County. I believe she's on our Zoom. She did exceptional work along with everybody in Doña Ana County and Southern New Mexico to motivate census response. And what I learned in that process was how important it was to distinguish what would be effective messaging and outreach in Las Cruces or Silver City or anywhere in Southern New Mexico, and how that's different from what's effective in tribal New Mexico, Northern New Mexico, and in the Albuquerque area. And so I'm bringing that attitude to this endeavor as well. And I want to hear from people throughout New Mexico. We've had a great beginning round of meetings so far with great input from a lot of reaches of our state. And so I look forward to hearing it from everybody in Southern New Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. My name is Ed Chavez. I went to school back east in Portales, New Mexico. I'm a product of the public education system in New Mexico, and very proud of the fact that I was able to go to public schools. And I think I learned a tremendous amount by doing so. The best part about Portales is I met my wife, who is from Cayman Springs, there in Portales. And we have 3 adult children and 8 grandchildren. And I agree with Senator Sanchez that grandchildren are great. I believe if I come back as a human in my next life, I'm gonna have my grandkids first. I was educated in the public schools and eventually became a lawyer, having gone to UNM School of Law and practiced law for about 23 years. And then I was appointed by Governor Bill Richardson to the New Mexico Supreme Court. I served there for 15 years, served for almost 4 years as the Chief Justice, and retired 3 years ago. And in my retirement, I decided that I wanted to continue to give back to the state I love. And the first year I represented the Human Services Department, and that's why I wanted to acknowledge Senator Papin, because we met closely about the behavioral health needs and the fact that a lot of the behavioral health providers had left New Mexico and actually filed lawsuits against the state for having been wrongfully accused of fraud. And we were able to negotiate settlements in those cases, and it's hopefully resulted in our behavioral health system re-energizing itself, because it's a tremendous need in New Mexico. And I've also done work for the legislature on criminal justice reform, some legislation for that purpose. And for the judiciary, I've sat voluntarily on some of their cases as they continue to work on their backlog in the Court of Appeals. And probably my most rewarding volunteer service is with Roadrunner Food Bank. That's really rewarding, and serving those people and meeting a lot of incredible people through that process. It has been a real experience for me. I really love the fact that we are going around the state and hearing from you, the public, because you happen to be the experts about your communities. Don't let us guess what your communities of interest are, what your needs or interests are, what your common social, cultural issues are. You should be telling us, and you should be telling us what you believe your boundaries are for your communities of interest, so that we can take all that into consideration and as we try to do a very good job for you, the citizens of New Mexico. With that, I would like to go into the really boring part of the agenda. We need to approve the agenda. I would propose an amendment to the agenda. The amendment I want to make is calls for us to approve the minutes of the last meeting, which took place yesterday. We still haven't prepared the minutes. Decided to sleep overnight instead of draft minutes. So I'd ask that we amend the agenda to remove item 4. And with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Okay. Member Cangelosi moves and Member Salcedo seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody abstain? Unanimously, we approve the amended agenda. And as for my opening remarks, I just want to explain how we're going to proceed here. This is not the only place where we're going to accept public comment. We actually have a satellite facility in Silver City at Western New Mexico University. And there are some folks there who will not only get to listen to your testimony, but they themselves will be able to testify, and we'll see them by camera. And the other way will be by Zoom. Lily,
Yeah, there are 14 people in Silver City, 4 of whom have signed up to speak.
okay. And so my plan is to not only hear from you, but I'm going to rotate a little bit. I'll probably move to Zoom, move some to Silver City, so that everybody believes that they're almost in the same room. So that's the way we will proceed. I do have a Spanish language interpreter by Zoom. So if anybody needs to testify at any of the venues in your preferred language of Spanish, we have somebody who can interpret that for the audience. We do have Lily Urban Vitella, who is our community liaison. She will moderate the input from the public. I do not have any time limits on your testimony. And I have told the members that they are at liberty to ask questions of whoever is making a presentation. Purpose is not to challenge you. The purpose is to make sure that we understand what you were trying to tell us and to maybe tease out additional facts, but we want to have a dialogue with you. And the best way to do that is to allow you to say your piece. And then if we want to any clarification, we'll ask you some questions. We will be here until 7 unless we've heard from everybody, in which case we could adjourn early. But if there are still people here that want to testify and it's 7 o'clock, we're going to keep pushing forward until everybody has had a fair opportunity to address the committee. With that, I think we have some breaking news. Brian Sanderoff is here. He's going to give us a redistricting 101, but today the Bureau of Census released some data that he's, I'm sure, going to share with us. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Yes, the Census Bureau did release the raw data a few hours ago. And so Michael Sharp's back at the office and our staff were crunching the numbers for the congressional districts, the counties, even the legislative districts. And so we're learning some interesting things. I'll share a few with you now. Actually taking the data that Michael sends and sitting in the student union building, just making some little crib notes here because it's so late breaking. So we do have some interesting information. So let us share the screen and pull up the PowerPoint. Okay. So Brian Sanderoff with Research and Polling, Brittany Poss from Research and Polling, Director of Data Analytics and Analysis. Brittany's a brilliant political scientist by training and education, plays a big role, as does Michael Sharp and about 6 other people in my office, providing the work that it takes to pull off what we're doing to assist you in our staffing. So quickly on the principles, the 5 principles of redistricting. Now, I looked in this room and I saw the very prominent crowd, and I saw many of the people who've been through this process before, so keep this quick. But basically, there are 5 principles that we really have to watch for. Traditional districting principles, you see them there: equal population, minority voting rights, contiguity, compactness, and communities of interest. So equal population, that's the point of redistricting. That every 10 years, the population changes. We adjust the boundaries to account for population shifts. If a district has become too populous, it will shrink. If a district has become not kept pace with population growth, its boundaries will grow so that each district, each legislator, county commissioner, congressperson represents about the same number of people. But there are different standards for equal population depending on Congress and the legislature. We'll talk about it. Minority voting rights. We're not going to get into the law. We're simply going to say the point of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is to not dilute the voting strength of protected minority or like of minority groups, ethnic language minority groups. So there are particular groups who are protected by the law. There are certain districts that should be protected as minority districts, and we watch that very carefully. Contiguity. Can't have 2 islands within your district. The precincts must touch at least at one point in space, and so that you don't want to have 2 islands within a district. Compactness pretty much deals with the shape of the district. Sometimes a district can get really, really large because it takes a lot of square miles to get to 50,000 people in a Senate district. But if you see a district starting to look like a snake and a pencil rather than a circle or a square, you can start asking yourself some questions. Communities of interest. All the things that you care about in your community. It could be your schools. It could be the mountain range. It could be the rivers, the dividing points, the county lines, the tribal lines, all those things that you feel help represent the communities, your shared values and interests. We try to keep those areas together so you can elect a candidate of your choice. Okay, we did know even last month what our population was in the state. 2.1 million. We knew that we grew by 58,000. We knew that that was a change of 2.8%, but that was the only thing the Census Bureau had given us until a few hours ago. We also knew that 30 years ago, we grew by some of the people in this room we were working with on redistricting back then. It grew by 20%. Then 20 years ago, the state grew by 13%, this time only 2.8. When the state grows by 20%, and that growth is unequal, and the west side of Albuquerque grows a lot, and eastern New Mexico or southern New Mexico doesn't, literally House and Senate seats shift from one part of the state to the other, and rural New Mexico loses representation. We've been seeing it for decades. At least that 2.8% gives us hope that there won't be as much shifting going around, although we'll talk a little about that based on what we learned a few minutes ago. So here is the state's growth, where it became a state in 1912, it starts in 1910 on estimates. And you see you just look at the graph and you can see it flattened out. This was the smallest growth rate, state of New Mexico in the history of the state. Okay, you're the first to see it. This is it. First group to see what the congressional districts are publicly. So much so I don't even have that paper in my slides. So I'll get rid of this here. Just minimize that. Okay, so CD2, where we sit today, has experienced more growth than the other two congressional districts. Now, 10 years ago, when these lines were drawn, each district had the identical population within one person of each other. And so now we're seeing that actually CD2 has grown by 8,000. CD3, 3,000, and then CD1, the Albuquerque area, minus 11,000. Now, those deviations are not that big. And we've been predicting all along that we wouldn't be seeing 5 or 10% deviations among the districts, that each three of these congressional districts do have significant population centers. So this is pretty much what we expected. But it is impressive that CD2 at this point has actually experienced, if you look at that 8,000 increase compared to CD1's 11,000 deviation, and that's what it really is. It's 11,000 people off the ideal population of the district. And so what is the ideal population of a district? You take the population of the state, and you that 2.1 million, and you divide it by 3, and you get 705,000. So when I was speaking of gaining and losing population, I should not have said it that way. I should have said that from the ideal population of the state, CD1 is down 11,000, CD2 is up 8,000, and CD3 is up 3,000. Here, releasing again for the first time, are the county, these are changes in population. So if you look at the final column, the right-hand column, this is news in the sense that Eddy and Lee County have experienced the highest rate of change in population, 15.8% increase in growth, 15% in Lee County, Sandoval County 13. The Census Bureau had estimated that Sandoval County would have been first and Eddy and Lee second and third, but actually we're now getting these official numbers that show that Eddy and Lee are first, Sandoval second. Los Alamos, 8% growth. That's 1,400 people, but it's still a high percent because you're starting with a low base. Santa Fe County, 7%. Otero County, 6%. Doñana, where we sit today, 5% or 4.9% rate of growth. Plus 4.7, Bernalillo 2.1. Census had estimated Bernalillo 2.9, it's 2.1, and then McKinley at 2.0. Okay, here are the counties that have lost population. Look at all of these. Now, as we sit here today, as we eyeball, Sierra County is an important one as we sit here today, minus 3.4%. Catron County, the same, 3.9. Grant County, an important one as we sit here today, minus 4.5% change in population. That's a reduction in population. Juan Socorro, -7%. Hidalgo, -14.6%. DeBaca, -16%. So Grant County, -4.5%. So we know about seats in, that we talked about once before, we might hear from again, those Hidalgo, Luna, Sierra seats that oftentimes move into Doña Ana as they don't have insufficient population. And we're seeing once again that southwest corner of the state not keeping pace with population growth. And then Doña Ana oftentimes serving as the place where some of these rural counties come in to pick up sufficient population. We'll have to wait and see if that's the approach again. Here's a focus more on those regional counties. These are those same numbers, but again, we see Doña Ana actually gaining 10,000 people. But Grant County losing 1,300, Hidalgo 700, Otero gaining 4,000 people. So the region as a whole up 10,000, but it's basically because of the growth rate in Doña Ana. I think that's been revised. I jumped the gun earlier on ideal population, but we pretty much have touched on this before. The ideal population is simply taking the population of the state and dividing it by the number of districts. Equal population among the districts. For Congress, the federal case law and state and the CRC rules, we're looking for almost equal population, almost identical population among the congressional districts. So getting it down to 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 people, whatever, 0 deviation when you round it, that's pretty much what it's come down to. Almost equal population, identical almost for Congress. For the New Mexico State and the House, State House and Senate districts, you're allowed for more leeway. The smallest state House seat, if you look at it, and the largest state House seat population-wise, the deviation cannot be more than 10 percentage points. So you have this play, some flexibility. The legislature has always looked at it as plus or minus 5% population deviation from the ideal population of a district. This committee has a little more flexibility. Conceivably, the smallest district might be 6% from the ideal population. That would mean the largest one couldn't be more than 4% because the total then would be 10%, no more than 10%. Do not dilute minority voting strength. We talked about that, giving minorities the population an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. Do not racially gerrymander. Racially gerrymander is when you build a race-based district just for the heck of it, when you're combining communities of interest that have nothing to do with each other in subordination of traditional districting principles. So some districts are protected, others be careful in their design. The way you gerrymander is through packing and cracking. You all know what that is. The slide to the compactness, you can look at a Texas congressional district from 1991, and you can see how non-compact it is. And you do know it when you see it. Okay, this is an important slide. This committee does have some rules. Most of these rules came from the state law. And there are certain things this committee shall do, certain things they may do, and a few things they can't do. The CRC districts shall be reasonably compact according to their rules, contiguous. And we talked about communities of interest, attempt to preserve them. Take into consideration, for example, geographic and political boundaries, including political subdivisions and tribal lands. The districts that are drawn should be composed of entire precincts, but may only be split if necessary to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act or federal law. So we're shooting for whole precincts. The committee may preserve the core of existing districts. The word is may, and the rules say that the things above the line, above there, are actually, this is subordinate to the things above the line. And then what the committee cannot do, the committee shall not use partisan election data or voter registration data in designing plans, except to ensure the plan complies with federal law. The committee shall not consider the voting address of incumbents, except to avoid pairing them, unless the communities of interest speak so strongly that you should pair them to maintain communities of interest. So there's a lot of judgment calls here, it seems, in how it's written, and we'll have to take our direction from this committee, of course. So to summarize, for the congressional districts, we got to see the percentage that each congressional district varies from the ideal population of a congressional district. That wasn't saying whether they gained or lost, it's just how far they're off from the ideal population. For the county slides that we looked at, it was actually percent increase or decrease in growth rates. Just to, actually, this is an estimate now, so I'm not going to dwell on it because this number will change once we crunch it. But about half the state's population is Hispanic, about 36% white, about 9% Native American, 2% African American, 3% Asian. That will change. Actually, there's a higher percentage of Hispanics in the southern portion of the state, but the Hispanic population is distributed very throughout the state of New Mexico. Whereas with Native Americans, 25% of the population in the northern half of the state are Native American, and that declined significantly in the other regions. With that, I will conclude the presentation.
Thank you very much, Brian, for the breaking news. Sunday, I wondered if there's been flashing on that screen. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that.
Unfortunately, it's just a product of the way that the screen connects to the projector, which is through just a basic IP mirroring. And so it's not a problem with a cable that I can fix. It's just a reality.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it. Lily, why don't we begin on Zoom with Representative Heath?
Mr. Chair, pardon the interruption, Mr. Chair, may I ask a couple of questions of Mr. Sanderoff?
Yes.
Thank you for indulging, because as a demographer in my specific line of work, we only get Christmas a couple of times every 10 years. The first Christmas is when they announced the apportionment totals a few months ago, and this is Christmas Day number 2, when we get to look at these numbers. And so I really appreciate the summary that Mr. Sanderoff provided us. The first thing that I want to make sure I understood correctly is the growth in our congressional districts. So you showed a comparison of where the relative growth was across the 3 congressional districts, but if I inferred correctly, based on our population growth of 58,000, all of our 3 congressional districts grew in population, just some more than others. Is that correct, Mr. Sanderoff?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
what we're looking at was the deviation from the ideal population.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was following there, and then I'll, also to note, because I think it's interesting, Congressional District 1, which showed the most decline, I think most of that is because of Torrance County, because there was a decline in Torrance County population. It doesn't explain all of it, but explains the bulk of that decline in CB1. Another comment I want to make is just how delighted I am to see the numbers for Eddy and Lee County, because I know, having studied the state for so long and talking to people down in the southeast corner of our state, that we know there's people down there, that we know there's more people down there than have gotten counted and gotten credit for. And it looks like the Census Bureau did a great job of counting everybody down there. And I have to give a lot of credit to that for all the complete count campaigns that were happening in Eddy and Lee County, and all the partnerships across all industries and political affiliations. The oil and gas industry was involved. There was a campaign to make sure that we got the man camps counted. There was a dedicated campaign to get the growing Hispanic community counted. So I'm just absolutely delighted to see that all that growth is reflected in the decennial numbers. They'll get their share of funding, they'll get their share of representation, and it's just really pleased to see all that. And also, I thought it was notable the 49.7% Hispanic population for New Mexico, because we didn't know if we would be that first state to, or if we would reach that 50% threshold. So I just thought that was interesting. I'm going to leave with a question for Mr. Sanderoff, and that is, at least nationally speaking, we know from these data that the number of US residents who indicated they were 2 or more races has doubled in the last 10 years. And so there's a lot of implications for that. The one I'm most interested right now is how that applies to the Voting Rights Act. And how are those 2 or more races applied? You know, if you have, you know, white and a black, and how do they get counted as far as the Voting Rights Act is concerned?
Well, there's also a question on the census forms before the race question that asks whether you are Hispanic, Latino, of Spanish origin. And that's a yes/no question. So when it comes to calculating the percent Hispanic, we work off of that question. So a person may be Hispanic and white, Hispanic and black, Hispanic and Native American. And so we look at, so that the issue of Hispanic is resolved that way on the yes/no question, regardless of your race. But on the race issue, yes, some people are declaring more than one race. And we have the ability to give credit, if you will, to 2 races. It becomes a little tricky because then you start adding up to more than 100%. But for example, for Native Americans, you know, it was 8.9%. If we gave credit for anyone who said they're Native American and one other race, that might jump up another percentage point. So for Hispanic, it's not a problem because we have the yes/no question. For other ones, we'll probably run the numbers a few different ways and show you how many people said they were more than one race.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I said, Your Honor, out of habit. Chair, can I ask Mr. Senator? I had asked earlier, do we actually know what the minority makeup is of the census numbers?
The Census Bureau has released that, and we're processing all that information as we speak.
But in general, I mean, I just heard Mr. Radigan quote a number, and I just wanted to know, do we know the number of Hispanic people we have versus Native American versus African American versus Anglo versus whatever?
Off of the new data, again, we have the data, but we're processing it. He may have been speaking at the national level. I don't know, but we will be able to release that really, really soon.
I believe he saw your slide where you indicated 49.7% Hispanic, and he thought it might inch up to 50%, but you haven't done the most recent calculation.
Correct. The percent Hispanic in New Mexico for many, many years has been rising at 2 percentage points every 5 years. But the estimates that we had there were for 2020 estimates. So they're not going to vary that much, assuming, you know, it's going to be pretty close to that number. But generally speaking, every 5 years, percent Hispanic in New Mexico rises by 2 points.
Thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
Okay, let's go to public input, and let's start with Representative John Heaton. And when he is on video, I'd like to apologize to him for not acknowledging him last night or missing him.
Representative Heaton, you are permitted to talk and can unmute yourself at any time. Maybe you can't. Let's see.
Okay, got it. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Again, my name is John Heaton, and I'm a longtime resident of Carlsbad. And I tried to speak yesterday, but had some technical issues. And at any rate, forgive me for interloping on your meeting and giving me the opportunity to speak. I very much appreciate it. If you are indeed blind to politics and incumbency, in spite of all the specific rules that are laid out, your process will create a map that I would guess will look much differently than what has been in place for the legislative districts as they have been drawn from decade to decade. I would guess when the legislators see your map, many will have been gerrymandered out of their districts or changed dramatically. And I want to be there when it is unveiled and watch the fistfights, the tears, and the astonishment that may occur. But at any rate, maybe the legislators will take your recommendations seriously and accept your basic map before politics and incumbency come into play. I know this is a first step toward creating a formal redistricting commission with an attempt to take the legislature and politics out of the process. I hope this ship doesn't sink before it gets out of the dock. Having been intimately engaged in the 2000 redistricting effort, I know the effort it takes to meet the standards, and I commend you for the work you are doing. It's a real challenge. My comments relate to Senate District 41, a minority district that contains the southern half of Eddy County and the southern half of Lee County, and Senate District 34, which is comprised of the western half of Carlsbad, some of western Eddy County, and reaches over into Alamogordo and down to Chaparral to form another minority district that occurred in the 2010 redistricting. The horrible consequence of the 2010 redistricting is, from our perspective, is that Carlsbad lost a senator, and that sacrifice resulted in Lee County having 2 senators for some time, and Alamogordo now having 2 senators, and Carlsbad and Eddy County having none that were residents of the county. And I think you just saw the statistics. First of all, I want you to know I'm a first-generation American. My parents immigrated to the United States for work and to seek a better life. They knew the United States was the melting pot of the world when they moved, when they came with many, there were many ethnicities, races, and a myriad of religions. Under their tutelage, we as children were taught to respect all people, regardless of color, race, or creed. My father spoke 5 different languages and couldn't understand why we weren't at least fluent in Spanish. I make this statement because it is difficult for me to talk about minorities and majorities, but I would like to point out some basic facts. The attempt to create minority districts, in our case, is a complete failure. District 41 has been represented by a white businessman for almost 30 years. And it is only now in the last election that Senator Gallegos has been elected from that district. And he too is a businessman. Senate District 32, likewise, has been represented by a white businessman. This emphasizes the fact that just because you create a so-called minority district, it definitely does not mean there will be a person rise from the ranks of the overtrodden, if you will, that is simpatico with the hardships of the minority population. I am in no way belittling our senator from Alamogordo, but Carlsbad is 130 miles away, and in some districts they have further distances to travel, but it includes going over the Sacramentos to the other side, and as a consequence, we rarely see our senator in Carlsbad. Furthermore, there is absolutely no commonality of interest between Alamogordo and Carlsbad. Our economy is driven by oil and gas, potash mining, WIP, the nuclear industry, offices of Lanel and Sandia, tourism, agriculture, and the Pecos River. Alamogordo has none of these economic interests. Our constituents earn their incomes in completely different ways. Commonality of interest is a basic premise of redistricting, and that certainly refers to similar economic interests. Issues of minorities and other precepts are part of the laundry list, but commonality of economic interest should be at a very high level of concern in your redistricting efforts. On the other hand, even though Carlsbad's economy is much more diverse than Lee County's, we at least do have common interests in many sectors to the extent the Lee County senators do understand our economy. However, if there is a conflict of interest, as an example, with water, as the example, water and water rights, you can be assured a senator will not abstain from a vote or policy. They will vote their county's interest. It's only natural. That is where they live. And that is a difficulty in how policy gets developed and how votes occur, protests of water rights. There's an enormous amount of that goes on between Eddy and Lee County. Please understand, our senators are very good people and trying to do the right thing, but it is totally unjust for the constituents of Eddy County to not have a full complement of support with their own senator. And I ask you, if Eddy County is 54% Hispanic and it has the population base of whatever was quoted today, 65 or 70,000 people, it's clearly more than 50,000. Why is it not considered as maybe a minority district and designated as such? The reason is, and you will quickly find out, that the redistricting approach is to begin at the four corners of the state, form districts, and move toward Albuquerque, where all problems can be resolved with Albuquerque's large population, and it can be carved up in a multitude of ways to resolve any problems that need to be fixed. Maybe you should begin in Albuquerque and work toward the rural areas and see how that works out for you. South Eddy County is the fastest growing area in the state. And I believe everyone knows Eddy and Lee County's contribution to the budget of the state through our industries. We need a senator that is in tune to these industries and will indeed fight for them. I hope you will take these comments seriously and correct the problem caused by the last redistricting. Carlsbad and Eddy County should not be the sacrificial lamb for some ridiculous DEI philosophy that exists today. Eddy County is approximately 54% Hispanic and should justly have a Senate seat. Thank you for your time and for what you are doing. And I certainly be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Eaton. Any questions from the committee? Thank you, Representative. We apologize again for the technical difficulties yesterday.
You're quite forgiven. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it very much.
Really?
Justice Chavez, we have 14 people who are signed up to speak, including folks in Silver City. Also, Senator Hamlin joined us, and Commissioner Alicia Edwards also joined us from Silver City. So,
welcome.
The next person who's on the list is Luis Guerrero. Mr. Guerrero.
Hi, thank you very much for being here. I have my notes on my phone, so if I look down on my phone, I'm not like texting or anything while I'm Anyway, let me find my notes. Well, thank you very much, Chair and members of this committee. My name is Luis Guerrero. Professionally, I work as a legislative and political organizer with Sierra Club Rio Grande chapter, but I've also lived in Las Cruces for over 15 years. I originally moved here for college, and I thought I was going to be here for 4 years. I attended NMSU. And then I met my wife and we just ended up staying here because we love it here. We love the food, we love the people, the public lands and everything that makes Las Cruces and Doña Ana, as you can tell, a great community. I would like to speak on the congressional map plan. It's called Re-Envision New Mexico. And just wanted to just make a couple of points. All maps should have racial equity as a consideration. The current CD2 is a majority Hispanic population, but is not a majority citizen voting age population, or CVAP, according to the 2019 ACS estimates. I would encourage the body or you guys to look at the citizen voting age population where possible to ensure that the Hispanic population is respected by eligible voters as well as general population in these districts. Fair maps are central to the premise of one person, one vote, as I think was mentioned earlier, and anything less than that is a form of voter suppression. If communities are split or diluted through gerrymandering, then their elected officials are not accountable and are less likely to lift up the central needs of the community, like health, healthcare, schools, roads, etc., as we all know. Also wanted to point out real quick, in the Albuquerque meeting, there was a lot of commenters from the public that were talking about splitting Bernalillo and talking about a map, like I said, it's called Re-Envision New Mexico. I am intrigued by the map and I respect the folks in Bernalillo to know what is best for their community. I'm going to hold my judgment until we have the census data, well, the actual census data. Right now we just, which I'm really glad, I'm actually really excited that we got to see some numbers today. This was before I knew that we were going to have this spoiler alert of what the census was looking like. Anyway, but one thing that should be maintained is that the entire southern New Mexico has a say, and I would just like Doña Ana County to have their share of the district as well. That plus the rural areas of the district would respect both the needs of those in Bernalillo and those also here in southern New Mexico as well. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Mr. Radigan, is your hand up?
No, sir, it's not.
The cursor.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
I do have a question, Mr. Gannett.
Okay.
Of course. Sorry, yes.
That's okay. I'm curious, the map that was up there, you like that map.
Yes, yeah.
One of the things that former Representative Heaton just talked about a few minutes ago, which interests me and would like a comment on, is he says a lot of southern New Mexico House and Senate districts are minority districts with, he said, I believe he said Eddy County had 54% Hispanics. But in those minority districts, he's saying other than this last election cycle, they're not represented by Hispanics, that they're represented by, I think he called them white businessmen. As an activist, how or why do you believe that our minority population isn't electing minority individuals in those districts? And do you think that map that you're advocating for will lead to that type of representation?
I mean, that's what I'm hoping. In reality, we need representatives that are reflective of their communities. And I know that's really hard to do. Like I can give you an example, like there's districts in Doña Ana County where you have people in Las Alturas, which is extremely wealthy. And you also have people in the colonias on the other side of the highway, and they're represented by the same people. So like it's really hard. And I'm just hoping that is something that we're able to fix. We only get an opportunity every 10 years to do this. And so I'm trusting in you guys and hopefully our body of elected officials to do the right thing for the people of New Mexico.
I guess the reason I asked the question is because northern New Mexico feels very strongly about keeping their district the same because of the historic nature of the population there as well.
Yeah.
And so how do we as a committee try to juggle that or put it on a plane that says, well, okay, northern New Mexico because southern New Mexico wants to do this.
Yeah, well, and I can understand that. I mean, the same argument can be made for the second congressional district. Like we've had Doña Ana County, just to give you an example, I mean, we have had a lot of representatives in this area that have come from Eddy County and from Hobbs and, from Eastern New Mexico, from like the oil lands, and, and that's not necessarily what everybody here wants. So, I mean, it can be, the same thing can be said here. I don't know the answer to your question. I wish I could help you with that, but I mean, like I said, I just hope you guys do the best. You guys have a really rough job in front of you, but thank you so much for serving.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. It's a tough question to answer, and balancing those interests are going to be very difficult on this committee. And for instance, I'm from Valencia County, and we've been split. I mean, we have Congressional District 1 and 2, and the person who represents Congressional District 2 doesn't really have a lot of interest in terms of our little county as well. So I understand the problem, and it's a problem that's going to exist for this committee to try to come up with a solution to solve that type of a problem.
Yeah.
But thank you for your activism, and thank you for your testimony.
No, absolutely. Thank you all so much.
Mr. Guerrero, I would just encourage you, now that we're going to get the official data, if you'll go to our website and then redistricting.org, draw us a map.
Sounds great, yeah.
Of what you think it should look like. You can do that. There's videos that will teach you how to do that, or you can get special training in English or Spanish language every week. So I'd encourage you to do that, because it's obvious to me you have a good head on your shoulders.
Well, thank you. I love data, so, so I'm excited to take a look at it, but thank you very much.
I just want to remind folks that are joining by Zoom to go ahead and keep your hand raised. Sunny will be letting me know in the order of the folks who are joining via Zoom. We also have folks that are with Melissa Ontiveros in Silver City, who is moderating there. Melissa, would you mind bringing Linda Pafford forward? And make sure she's standing in front of the mic and the camera so we can hear her comments as well. Thanks.
Lily, could you tell us our speaker's name again, please?
It's Linda Pafford, Pafford, if I'm reading your handwriting correctly.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Linda Pafford, and I'm here to add my points on this. In some ways, I am echoing what was just said by Mr. Heaton, describing his problems with District 34, which, from looking at the map, looks contiguous. It is contiguous, but it is representing two disparate groups of people on either side. I have a similar problem in my House District 39, which is split between half of Silver City and a chunk of Las Cruces. The problem is that how do you campaign for any candidate when half of your district is 200 miles away? So in District 38 is the other half of Silver City and is shared with Truth or Consequences. Those groups really don't have a lot in common. So I don't know, I don't have a map because I really don't know how you're going to solve this problem. But contiguous and compact, I think, is vitally important to our political process so that I can talk to the other members of my district about my concerns. The other point I wanted to make is I know you are going to attempt to address all of those points that you showed us in the first part. How do you decide whether to work towards racially I'm sorry, I'm losing some of my words here, to racially compact so that that group of people can have a representative versus keeping things in large areas where you have several different kinds of groups. We went through this in Silver City not too many years ago when we expanded from 3 county commissioners to 5. And we found that the 3 maps that the agency brought to us to consider really were very different. One map gave the downtown business district a representative. Another map gave some of the Hispanic areas a representative. The map that was finally chosen was more divided by population, and none of those districts had a majority Hispanic population. So I'm sympathetic to your problem, but I am also sure that we are all going to be watching. And when it comes to the legislature, we're all going to have something to say. But these 2 issues about having to travel these huge distances that we have in New Mexico to try to campaign for one or another representative is a real hardship. And it means that we are not getting local representation. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Ms. Pafford, this is Lisa Curtis. I do have a question. I think we can see that you walked away from the microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm familiar with Silver City, my very favorite client in the entire world, and I would tell you she is the most important resident of your entire city, Nadine Herrera. It's caused me to spend a lot of time in your city. I want to know that division of Silver City, you said where it's split into 2 districts. And I want to know if there's some kind of natural dividing line within the city that you think changes communities of interest, within the city, or whether there's, I don't know, some kind of rational way you can explain to us why 38 and 39 split your city.
No, there is no natural division. There is a highway, but it doesn't follow the highway. I believe, and I cannot speak with authority, but the impression I got was that they wanted to put the conservative mining district of Silver City in with the conservative new construction of Las Cruces. And that gave a conservative district. The other part of the District 38 takes downtown Silver City, which would be somewhat more liberal, and ties it in with the conservative rural districts, and then stretches that over to Truth or Consequences, which is mostly, I'm kind of speaking out of turn, I suppose, but mostly out of staters who come there for the lake. And Truth or Consequences does have some very real issues that they need addressed, but they are again lumped in with the conservative rural area. So I don't feel they're actually getting fair representation either.
Thank you, Ms. Pafford. I appreciate you explaining that to us.
Ms. Pafford, I have a follow-up question. Can you tell me, or the committee, what issues do you perceive need attention from your elected officials?
I wouldn't say that they're not getting attention. I'm just trying to express that I think, well, our District 39 House representative from the previous session, a lot of times he'd be in Las Cruces and people would be asking me, where is he? And other times he'd be in Silver City, and I'm sure Las Cruces wondered where he was. So I don't think it's on, I mean, he did a good job of trying to get both people input. But my problem is that if I want to talk to the rest of my district, it's impossible. It's kind of a joke, but kind of not, in that half of my district in the newer parts of Las Cruces may not even know where Silver City is.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Brian, could you blow up 38? I just want to know where that, I want to know where that odd little piece is.
When you say,
When you blew up 38 and it was so right at Silver City.
it's following a precinct boundary, but 30.
Yeah, what is that right there? And if Ms. Packard knows, that's awesome, but I mean, why does it do that?
Yeah, there's a road and probably a precinct, but so basically, House, as we're hearing, House District 38 is half of Silver City and then goes to Truth or Consequences. And House District 39 is the other half of Silver City, goes to Barrett, Hurley, the other half of Sierra County and into Las Cruces. We have been playing around with creating a Grant County Senate district, keeping Silver City whole, Grant County whole, and a Truth or Consequences, Sierra County Senate district. Now, no matter how you change it up, you still don't have enough population, right? So you're still going to need to go into Doñana or somewhere. But so one of the things you'll be able to consider is a Grant County a Senate, a House district, and a Truth and a Sierra County one, possibly going into Doñana. There might be some other implications and all that, and we're looking into it, but that is a possibility for your consideration. And we learned today, I will reveal those two House districts. So we have these districts in southwestern New Mexico, both in the Senate and the House, that have over the decades had sufficient population to be whole districts. And so they start moving toward Doñana. The same thing happens in the Senate. Senate 35 moves into Doñana and has Mesilla in it. You know, if we pull up Senate 35. And now we've learned from the Census Bureau today that these two districts, House District 38 and 39, when you combine their deviations, they're minus 15%. So they're going to have to continue to grow. So one approach might be to create a Grant County House District and a Sierra County House District, but then they'll still need even more population into Doñana or elsewhere. Or if they move northward, that will create a domino effect into Socorro and Catron going up the line. But there might be a solution to this one.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Tiffany Rivera join us on Zoom.
Okay, Ms. Rivera, I've permitted you to talk. You can unmute yourself whenever you like.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to comment this afternoon. My name is Tiffany Rivera, and I'm here on behalf of New Mexico Farm and Livestock Bureau. Our organization represents over 20,000 member families statewide, many of whom are directly involved in agriculture and agriculture-related businesses. Our individual members support our many rural and frontier communities. And during the redistricting process, we want to ensure that there is fair and adequate representation for our rural communities and our state's agriculture producers. The cities of Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Las Cruces carry a lot of weight and representation, especially in the legislature. And this often poses a large challenge, as many of our rural citizens do not feel like they have a voice, nor do they feel like they can play a meaningful role when it comes to developing policies that affect their daily lives. We want to be sure that during the redistricting process, our rural communities remain resilient and can flourish, and that will require a meaningful voice in our state legislature as well as our congressional delegation. It's absolutely imperative that we have a strong agriculture voice, because agriculture affects you and I in our daily lives, from the food that we eat to the clothes that we wear to the fuel that we consume. So I ask, as you guys proceed through this process, and I thank you all for the many hours of work that you are doing on this, that you keep our rural constituents in mind, and you keep our agricultural producers in mind as well. Thank you.
From the committee.
This is Lisa Curtis, Mr. Vieira. I do have a question for you. So having experience with ranching families in particular, we've heard a lot on this process of meetings about what's rural and what's not rural. And I want to get your understanding of that. Right, so we have Carlsbad, which has become quite a large town. We have Las Cruces, which is quite a large town. I want to know whether, or Roswell, I mean, do you consider being part of those towns being part of rural New Mexico, or do you consider the farms and the ranches to be and that their community of interest is such that they should be separate from those towns?
I do feel like those communities are a portion of the rural community of interest, I believe is the correct term. However, I think when I think rural, I think of communities and locations that are geographically further from those larger metropolitan areas and that have a harder time accessing, whether it's groceries or pharmacies or things like that. So communities that have to travel longer in order just to access the basic necessities is really kind of what I see as being a rural community.
Okay, I appreciate that definition. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera, I have a question for you. Do you have some specific concerns? I completely agree with you that we need to be careful with the rural-urban divide, but do you have some specific concerns you can point to us about the lack of representation in rural New Mexico?
Sir, at this point in time, I think I can definitely look deeper into providing specifics and submit those through the portal. Offhand, I don't have anything tangible to offer you. However, I think that, we see where the majority of the saturation in legislators lie. And like I mentioned in my comment, it's Las Cruces, Santa Fe, the larger cities, Albuquerque. And so although those cities play a major role because that's where the majority of the population exists, I think that it's still important that our rural communities, where individuals whose voices are just equally as important are represented and their voices are allowed to be heard and actually carry weight. That's the major concern that we have, is our producers out there and our community members who live in these rural areas, they don't feel like they are being heard and they don't feel like they're being represented.
Okay, thank you. I would encourage you to submit comments. You have about 4 weeks to get us some information before we need to publish concepts for maps and then get additional public input. So if you can do that for us, it will cause us to focus. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next, we have Uriel Rosales.
Hello, good afternoon. I will be giving my public comment in Spanish. That's fine.
We do have a Spanish interpreter available. And
Yes, we can, Fabiola. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Uriel Rosales y yo soy un residente de la comunidad de Chaparral, Nuevo México. Estoy brindando comentario público el día de hoy porque la redistribución de distritos es crucial para mi comunidad. Los distritos que se dibujan en este año darán forma a nuestras vidas y a nuestras comunidades durante los próximos 10 años. Lo cual afectará la representación de nuestras familias y la oportunidad de invertir en nuestra prosperidad y bienestar local. Como residente de Chaparral, vivo en la comunidad no incorporada más grande del estado. Prácticamente somos una colonia y lamentablemente estoy aquí para informarles a todos que estamos siendo olvidados y sin voz en este estado. Lo que quiero decir con esto es que no tenemos consejo municipal, no tenemos alcalde, en general no tenemos representación. La comunidad de Chaparral está creciendo rápidamente y merece una representación adecuada. No nos sentimos representados en absoluto, y un claro ejemplo en Chaparral es el Distrito 34 del Senado. Mi senador está en Alamogordo, pero al mismo tiempo también representa a Carlsbad. Las dos son comunidades con muy diferente interés y merecemos que se observen de cerca cómo este proceso de redistribución de distrito da representación a la comunidad de Chaparral. Para concluir, exijo una redistribución justa para que podamos asegurar la representación que merecen nuestras familias. Gracias.
Mr. Rosales, would you just tell the public the needs and interests of Chaparral?
Yes, como mencioné, Chaparral se encuentra muy distante de Carlsbad, lo cual Carlsbad tiene interés en términos de aceite, gas, petróleo, etcétera, mientras que Chaparral es una comunidad donde la mayoría de los trabajos que tenemos son negocios pequeños, ¿verdad? donde muchos de nuestras familias tienen que manejar para trabajar en el campo, para trabajar en el roofing. Son intereses muy diferentes. Y al mismo tiempo nuestro senador está en Alamogordo, que está a 40 millas de distancia. Ese es el hecho que siento que no estamos siendo representados, porque igual son tres comunidades muy distantes con intereses igual, muy distantes.
Chaparral is split, is that right, Brian?
It is.
Do you have environmental concerns in Chaparral?
Besides climate change, yes, a few weeks ago or a month ago, we have been having winds of 70 plus miles per hour, which haven't been seen for years. We have been getting a lot of rain. We are a desert. We've been getting floods. And yet we don't have the proper representation to find solutions and to get that funding needed to the community, right? So it's very difficult to find similar interests between Carlsbad, Alamogordo, and Chaparral, since we both have, the three of us have very different problems at the same time.
Other questions from the committee?
Mr. Rosales, the Senate District 31, Anthony, that area, I just want to know about whether you believe that, now this area, I think Mr. Sandrock's going to tell me may have grown some, and I know we have population requirements. Right, but as far as your community of interest that you're talking about in Chaparral, is it more closely aligned with 31 than it is with 34?
We are like divided very differently in not only in Senate districts, but also in counties, right? We're divided by Otero and Doña Ana. I'm honestly not here to tell you like my perspective. I don't have a map myself. I am here to ask for a proper representation for us to not be divided in all of those ways. Even though I may say, I guess half of the population, well, I'm not sure in terms of numbers, how much are we divided between District 31 and 34? If it makes sense, it shouldn't be divided at all if you're in the same community. And we see that throughout the whole state. So I'm not here to tell you that I feel more connected to 31 than to 34, but why I'm here is to tell you that I'm not being represented, and I feel that my community is split on 2 or even on 4.
Okay, the area that's in 31, and I have to tell you, I'm not terribly familiar with Chaparral, although I know Mr. Saucedo is. That area that's in 31, that's also part of Chaparral, is that right?
Yes.
Down right next to it?
Yes, that the last part, right where the 31 is, yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the kind of needs you're talking about, the small businesses, the farm workers, the other parts in 31 that we can see that are connected to Chaparral right there, are those the same needs, the same interests?
Yeah, there's exactly the same interest. Also, most of the businesses in Chaparral are on District 34, which is also kind of difficult for people from 31 to travel all the way to 34, which is a long distance. And the same way, people from District 34 all the way close to Highway 54 have to drive all the way to communities like Anthony, Las Cruces to work on those fields. And I'm telling you this because my mom works on the fields, and she has to drive those long distances to travel. I also have friends that work on the roofing industry, and they have to travel to Las Cruces, El Paso to work on those things. And one of the biggest problems that we have in the community of Chaparral is the work opportunities. We don't have that. Only we have local job opportunities, like on small stores, etc. And that's the reason why we have to travel those long distances. And also that's another problem that obviously you're not gonna find in Alamogordo or Carlsbad.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Can we bring up the House map? With Mr. Rosales, first of all, I completely understand your comments about the Senate districts, and I appreciate that. I'm asking to pull up the House district to see if, or excuse me, the House map to see if you have an opinion as to representation in the House. My understanding, well, I know the representative is in Chaparral, but it's a really large district. What do you feel about that? If we could, yeah, so it stretches to, Brian, please help me here, goes up to Oregon, then to Holloman.
And includes the Air Force Base. Yes, it's the Chaparral Air Force Base District. And all of Chaparral is combined in the district.
Yeah, and the same way I would say, even though the representative is from Chaparral, I think that people in the other communities don't feel represented by that same person, right? And because it's they live really far from that person, although I'm pretty sure that representative is doing its best to represent that section of the state.
And with regard to communities of interest, Chaparral, of course, is part of the Gadsden School District, correct?
Oh, excuse me?
Chaparral is part of the Gadsden School District?
Yes, it is.
Which of course includes Anthony, Summit Park, Santa Teresa, those areas. Which are in 52 and 34.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, William.
Thank you.
Next, if Melissa can have Mr. William Hudson come forward in Silver City.
I missed the name, I'm sorry.
All right, that's William Hudson.
Chairman Chavez, members of the committee, my name is William Hudson, and I'm from the Mimbres Valley, east of Silver City. And I'm here simply to provide a minimal amount of input, really. I understand and realize what a difficult task you have in front of you. The complaint that was raised earlier about State House District 38 and 39, I completely understand. I'm in sympathy with those complaints. I feel the same way about them. And if there's anything you can do about providing greater compactness, I suppose would be the word for those districts, it would be appreciated. I also want to emphasize the importance statewide of maintaining, I suppose, the minority districts that do exist in this state, the districts that are heavily Native American or Hispanic, and that are being represented currently by Hispanic and Native American representatives and senators. I believe it was stated earlier, we have a tremendously diverse state legislature, and I would like to see it stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Any questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
Next, here we have Perla Aguilar.
Hello, my name is Perla Aguilar, and I'm here to discuss over the Hispanic population. So I am from Las Cruces area. I came here and attended New Mexico State and just recently graduated. And I wanted to give my input on how we have been, as a Hispanic community, as a woman of color, been unrepresented and have had not much of a voice. I was raised in Roswell, so District 2 is something that I've always been in. And we see that the population has grown from what we see in the census in the Hispanic community, and we see that it's been what they say representative. However, when we look at the actual numbers of the citizen voter age population, we are seeing that the people that are saying are being counted aren't actually people eligible to be voting and all that sort of things. And those are people that are going to be voicing our opinion with legislation itself. So when I ask for you guys to really look closely at your redistriction is when you guys look the whole numbers of itself, see who is actually eligible to take voice in that redistriction and in that legislation itself. From there, Congressional District 2 is seen as the largest Hispanic voter district. However, that is not the case. We need to be sure that Hispanic people are included in the data are eligible voters, because we need to make District 2 a priority. And this priority will be district majority ZBAP Hispanic voters. As my fellow colleague said, it's a 10-year gap that we take to redistrict, so it's important. And I'll take a piece from what I was taught at New Mexico State. We gotta be bold. We gotta make that decision to not just stick with traditions and keep it as it is. Yes, we're gonna have people from the north that have customs, but in all reality, we have, in a way, the same culture, and we need to respect the same culture and languages that are in each southern and northern, and try to see how not just one side would be forgotten that is usually done on the southern side.
Any questions from the committee?
Actually, a question more for Mr. Sanderoff. When will we have those numbers? In other words, eligible voting age population?
I think we have that raw data and that we're just processing it all now. So we will have it soon, very soon.
So I would say with that, then we've encouraged many, when that data comes out, please provide a map, draw some map of what it might look like with the percentage you would like to see of, again, voting age population, or excuse me, eligible voting age population.
Let me remind us that we're also adding all the new precinct splits into the census data. The Census Bureau didn't have the precinct splits. We're adding those back in. We're going to rerun all the information with the race data by age. So we need to go through that exercise, but it's happening as fast as we can do it.
And of course, with all liberty, I would look into that map and see itself. But I feel like my part right now is to be able to show you that there is that gap that you guys are missing on the data itself. It's not a whole, you guys have to look at the detail itself. And I'm just providing that information for y'all guys of redistricting and mapping it too.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much. Brian, a rough estimate on when we will have complete data, what precinct splits? Rough.
We've already sent the precinct splits to districtor. And they're working on that. I can't speak for them. And then we're doing our own thing with our software. But everyone's working 24 hours a day on it.
I will say that districtor, 2 days ago during a press conference, said that they anticipated being able to get everything done within 7 to 10 days. Next.
We have Representative Terrazas, who has joined folks in Silver City. Representative.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us and to share our thoughts, including those of those residents of New Mexico who are stepping forward. I appreciate listening to all the concerns. The map has always been interesting to me. And I saw the map up earlier, and there's a portion of my district and other districts that have certain communities that are divided into many pieces. And that makes it difficult for those communities. I will be honest. One of those is, if we can pull the map, if you would be kind enough to do that, you can look at where District 39, and I don't know all the district numbers right there in Hatch, but in the Hatch area, there's one there. I think Hatch is divided into like 3 different parts. It was interesting as I walked my district, how that was divided. And so for those people that live in the Hatch area, you have that area where I think it's here you go, 36, 35, and mine 39. You start seeing how they're all divided there, and it makes it difficult right there when you're going to talk to those individuals and represent them. You may be on one street, you're saying hi to one person, you cross the next street and you're not. You go down another block and it's quite difficult to understand even for ourselves what our district is. Even though we represent our district, we still represent the residents of New Mexico, but that's still for the common person that can be a bit confusing. So I appreciate some of our residents and some of my constituents sharing their thoughts and their concerns. I will tell you that, for instance, 38, District 38, I'll kind of move a little bit, but District 38, that representative lives in Truth or Consequences, has to travel about 3.5 hours to the edge of her district, which is in Hidalgo. Yet, I believe Representative Sweetsers was, I believe, 32. I'd have to see the map closer. She has a little portion of Grant County instead of just holding all of Hidalgo. I just always found that interesting of how that was all divided. And so it makes it hard for those small communities, those little pockets of communities, for them to get representation. So I do understand that. Even though as a representative, it's our job to recognize and know the needs of our community. Mine is very diverse, of course. I have farming, ranching, mining, small business. I have parts of my district that are liberal, parts of my district that are very conservative. But that is New Mexico. That's where we live. We live in a very diverse area. But if there's any way, and you do have a difficult job at your hands, and I hope that you get the guidance that you need to compact those things, even though I enjoy representing all those 3 counties. And every week I try to make time for every single of those counties. It's still, I understand some of those needs. We do try. I know that many of the representatives and senators try to travel the district on a weekly basis. It takes me about 5 hours to drive my district all the way around. So I understand what Mrs. Paxton was saying. She was sharing that. I think that's a very interesting thing. There is also things like, and I think you showed that divot on, I'll call it a divot or a portion of 39 when you get to Silver City. As you come into Silver City, you can see that little portion. As you walk the district, it's kind of strange, and you can just kind of, as you zoom in to many of these communities, you see these slivers and stuff that are quite confusing, not only for your volunteers, but your candidates and your and for the community. So I do understand that. So we don't see clear, clean lines. It's kind of strange. So we have, I know you have a large task at hand. We are a very rural, open state. So some of the districts are open because I have large pieces of my district that are ranching and national forest and so forth. So I see why some of that is big and some are smaller based on the population. But I appreciate that, and my hat's off to you because you have a big task ahead of you. So I don't know if you have any questions. I've got a meeting in a few minutes. So, but if you'd like to ask me anything, I'd entertain that.
Any questions for Representative Terrazas? No questions, Representative. Thank you very much for your input. I think we're going to take a 10-minute break. We have a Spanish language interpreter who's been interpreting throughout the proceedings, and we've been going about 2 hours. So let's take 10 minutes.
Muchas gracias.
Hey, how are you? Good. My numbers are quite interesting, weren't they? Oh, yeah.
Let's get back together in a couple of minutes.
Enough said. Enough said. All right, folks, we're getting back together. Silence your phones and find your seats. That was super awesome. Looks so pretty as usual. All right, if folks can find their seats, we're going to go ahead and get going. We have Senator Diamond up next.
We have, let's let them all get here.
Yes, yes, we'll wait for.
Oh, 44.3.
It's on autopilot now. That's how you know I've done my job. It's all good to go. Speak whenever you like.
One more member.
Senator Sanchez. Yes, ma'am.
I have no idea if it's still on or not.
So there's just one button. If it's orange.
There's the, see, you have your net. There it is.
Yeah.
It's already good. This is on. Okay. Senator Sanchez.
That was no mind. Senator Diamond, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time. My name is Crystal Diamond. I represent Senate District 35. So that encompasses most of the Boot Hill region of New Mexico. I have all of Hidalgo County, all of Luna County, all of Sierra County, and then I have the west side of Doñana County, so the Cacho Hills area and the Old Mesilla area here. I have to tell you that we are a long way from Santa Fe. And to be very frank with you, we like it that way. So I want to thank you guys for coming to us rather than expecting Southern New Mexico to go to you. Thank you for traveling the parts of New Mexico that allow rural New Mexico to really participate in this project. And on that note, I want to thank you guys for your time. I know that you are not paid much better than legislators. So thank you for your time away from your jobs, your careers, your family to be here. I think we're all optimistic that collectively we're going to come up with some better maps. I have to tell you that in my short time of service, I have come across a couple communities of interest, and I now understand their frustration. I want to echo much of what Representative Cruces mentioned. There is a community of Vernon, which is in Hidalgo County, and it is on the far Arizona border. I share all of Hidalgo County with one House representative, except that community of 300 people. It may seemingly appear like it should be attached to that House District 38, but the problem is to access Vernon for that House representative, She has to drive about 4 hours through a district, so she's not making community stops that is not hers to get to one community. And because of that, that community is really represented by a senator, because it's kind of unfair to assume that that House rep is going to make frequent travels to that area. And really the loser, like many of these communities, is that small community of Vernon, New Mexico. So I'd like you to please consider that. I also want to echo that Hatch, New Mexico, I believe is represented by 5 legislators, possibly 6, that Hatch Valley, so the Hatch, Dairy and Array area. And because of that, because the people of Hatch, New Mexico, each of us don't have a whole lot of numbers of votes, they really don't influence elections. And what that does is it really makes their voice not as strong as it should be in Hatch. I'm going to volunteer to take Hatch if I need to, but I'm sure all of our other legislators will. But I would agree that Senator Cruces really needs to look at Hatch, New Mexico to make sure that their voice is as loud as it possibly can be. Again, I just want to thank your time. Ms. Curtis, I wanted to follow up on a comment that you made earlier saying, how do we define rural versus urban New Mexico? Before I was a senator, I may have told you that Carlsbad, sure, that counts as rural New Mexico. But I will tell you, when I'm standing in Columbus, New Mexico, there's a big difference. There's a big difference with the social difference, the education difference, the industries that are there. I'll tell you that I spent all of today with Secretary Keyes. And in Columbus, New Mexico, we were launching a new project that's coming in there at Algae Farm. It's the first time that we put LEDA funds in Luna County in over 10 years. There is very little economic development, and these rural and remote communities are screaming for help. And so there's a drastic difference between Carlsbad or Las Cruces and Animas or Verdon. So thank you for noting that and for taking the time and attention. Again, thank you guys all for your time. I have another engagement here, but I'm glad I got to visit with you, and welcome to Las Cruces. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Diamond? Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you being here. Brian, it's a hot topic day. Do you have any new news for us?
Yes. Right here. So just to remind everyone, we look at total population when it comes to equal population among the districts. We try to get them as close as we can, but we're looking at voting rights issues. We look at the percentage of the voting age, the adult age. And committee member Curtis was asking about that. So we did run it. And in fact, the percentage of the Hispanic voting age population in the state of New Mexico did rise significantly from 42.3% to 44.3%. So it grew 2 percentage points in the last 10 years. I don't have the total population of Hispanic. I'm guessing it's around 50%, but the voting age population has grown significantly over the last 2 years, from 42.3 to 44.3% among adult voting age population Hispanic.
I know I'm probably pushing it, but can you give us ideas by region?
No.
Okay.
I asked exactly the same question.
I blame you for trying, right?
We do have Doña.
We did get numbers for Doña Ana County adult Hispanic. In 2010, it was 60.4. Today, it's 63.0.
Mr. Chairman, say that again, please.
Doña Ana County in 2010, 60.4% adult Hispanic. 2020 census, 63.0% adult Hispanic.
Pretty. Turn on the mic. Oh, it's on?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Thank you.
Next we have Viviana Arcianaga.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Viviana Arcianaga, pronouns she, her, ella, and I am a community organizer with MCAFE. I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico. My community is very diverse with people of color who have made the city their home, and just like me and my family. Spanish-speaking people and people of Hispanic and Latino culture. In restaurants and shops and churches, our culture is present through our language, our music, and our food. We are here and we live here. That is why there must be Hispanic and Latino representation in the House and Senate so that people like me and my family are represented. We haven't seen representation in over 50 years, and we need to make sure that we have the majority adult Hispanic district and congressional district too. I asked the redistricting committee to have flexibility when considering communities of interest. We are diverse. We are a diverse state, and what works for my community, for me and my community, may not work for others, especially for Southern New Mexico. I know there is no representation on the Southern redistricting committee, and you must listen to Southern voices when considering. Nobody knows our communities like we do, and the people that live in them. I demand a fair distribution so that we can safely represent what our families deserve. Thank you.
Questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Miss Linda Pecote, Pecotte, in Silver City.
Lily, she just left. The next person we have is Frost. And Frost is left too. And finally, we have Andy Payne.
Thanks, Melissa.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Andy Payne. Voting rights in our country have never been under greater threat than they are today. And that's why it's so important to improve the voting system. And one way to do that is make sure that the voting district boundaries are accurate and fair and representative of the citizens living within them. So I thank all of you for serving on the CRC to improve the voting system in New Mexico. Historically, and especially in recent years, minority communities have been disenfranchised through the redistricting process, but you have the unique opportunity to correct that. One way to accomplish this is to address race equity as a crucial focus of your work. But I'm afraid that even if you do so, the legislature may not accept your recommendations. The 7 members of the CRC is not representative of what New Mexico looks like, and the legislature knows this. So the CRC needs to go out of your way to demonstrate to the legislature that you are considering the minority groups in the state if you want the legislature to take your recommendations seriously and adopt them. So to do that, I have a couple of just generic recommendations regarding race equity. 1, maintain or increase the current number of majority Hispanic and Native districts. And 2, don't split up the Hispanic and Native voters in any district that now exists. Another critical focus of the CRC's recommendation should be prison gerrymandering. Currently, prisoners are counted as residents in the district in which they are incarcerated. This results in increasing the representation of rural counties where the prisons are located and reducing the representation from urban and native districts. Mario Jimenez with Common Cause of New Mexico recently wrote in the Silver City Daily Press, quote, "This system tends to favor districts around Hobbs and Grants. At least 3 current House districts are comprised of populations that are 4% incarcerated. Within Cibola County, where the women's prison is located, more than 38% of one city district is composed of inmates who don't vote. To be fair to prisoners and to their home communities, they need to be counted in the districts from which they were or where they were from before they were incarcerated. That is their community of interest." Thank you for hearing my recommendations, and I wish you good luck and wisdom on the process that you are working through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Let's see if the committee has any questions.
So, Mr. Payne, this is Lisa Curtis. Can you hear me okay?
I'm sorry, I have a hearing disability and I can hardly understand what's coming through the system here.
Mr. Payne, can you hear me? This is Lisa Curtis.
What did she say?
Melissa, perhaps you can relay Member Curtis's question to Mr. Payne?
Yeah, she looks like she's doing exactly that.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Payne, I just would like, I would like it if you could make your reference available to us about the percentage of the population in the women's prison. The 38% of the district, which I don't know if you mean a district or a precinct. But I would really like your references for that. Could you make that available to the committee, please?
Yes, I was referencing, I mentioned in the thing, this was a quote from Mario Jimenez with Common Cause of New Mexico in a recent editorial to the Silver City Daily Press. I think it was in day before yesterday's paper. And those were his statistics that I quoted.
Okay, thank you.
And Member Curtis, Chair, Mario is here. And so when he comes back to his seat, I'll hit him up for the reference. Other questions?
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Fred Kennan.
I'm going to assume this is picking me up. Is it?
Yes, sir. Let me adjust. Okay.
Hi, I'm Fred Kennan. I submitted a map earlier, which Mr. Sanderoff accurately identified certain defects in the criteria, and the committee appropriately did not give it any consideration. I'm here to instead today express my support for the re-envisioning New Mexico map. It was up on the screens earlier, and hopefully we can get it back up there. And by the way, I'm both an Aggie and a Lobo. I went to NMSU and also UNM Law. Been practicing for about 25 years, mostly in state and local government. With a little more practice like other lawyers, I might get the hang of it. With this map, I believe the author is a Ms. Gonzalez, whom I've never met, posted this a few days ago for the congressional districts. There you go. Is there some way that you can get it so that we can see the, there we go, thank you. I believe that it checks all the boxes. It preserves communities of interest, meets all the criteria that Mr. Sanderoff summarized earlier. Each one of these districts would involve incredible diversity. And I think that's almost unavoidable no matter what you choose, because we have such a huge state with so many different communities and only 3 districts in which to put them. You notice that the proposed district on the right goes from the bottom of the state to the top with 3 districts and a basically square state. It's unavoidable that at least one district goes from one side of the state to the other. Right now, we have 2 of them. This would have one of them. The author mentioned the communities of interest preserved in the blue district. It captures so much of the Native American communities. She mentioned in the southwestern district, the green one would result in, I believe she said, a 54% Hispanic population. I'd also point out that she's drawn this with mathematical precision where there's less than 1% from the maximum population or deviation from the maximum population in each one of these districts. I would also point out that as we've heard in the last couple of days, the people on the east side of the state have emphasized their economics, the oil and gas and ranching. And I would point out that those of us that live on this side, we don't have those same concerns. You have to drive 3 hours just to find your first pump jack from here. A lot of people in here might not even know what a pump jack is. It was mentioned earlier, one of the issues of concern from the gentleman that was speaking about Chaparral, he mentioned climate change when asked what's one of his interests. And I think that's shared by a lot of people. And we all know that ultimately the answer to climate change is less fossil fuels being put in the atmosphere. You go over to the east side of the state, and my guess is climate change becomes a 4-letter word. I would also point out that in the last 50 years, and just another observation from living here, the east side of the state begins at the Organ Mountains. You go on the other side of the Organ Mountains and the attitudes and views change dramatically between Doña Ana County, Otero County, and eastward. And in the last 50 years, we've had this area represented by somebody on this side of those mountains for exactly 2 years when Ms. Torres Small was in Congress. The rest of the time, it's been from somebody on the east side. And right now, it's Ms. Harrell from Alamogordo, but other than her, the rest of them have all been from Chavez County, Lee County, or Eddy County. And it seems to me that when people complain about the representation, this community, Las Cruces being the second largest city in the state, Doña Ana County being the second most populous county in the state, we haven't enjoyed all that much representation. And I also recognize that Mr. Sandaroff and the committee have an impossible task to satisfy everybody. No matter what you do, there's going to be trade-offs. Everybody wants to have a representative or a senator from their town, and that's just not going to happen. You're going to have, especially when you're looking at the congressional districts, how many towns and cities in New Mexico, and there's only going to be 3 people in Washington representing New Mexico. So there are no guarantees, no matter how you draw your districts, there's only so many representatives and a heck of a lot more communities. I support this particular proposal, and I hope you give it serious consideration. One other thing that I would also mention, and that is, well, 2 things. There are 3 counties that border Mexico, and the counties on the southeast side of the state do not. So that is, and because of our proximity to Mexico, we have a different experience with immigration than counties that don't border Mexico. We also have a proximity to El Paso. And that has a huge effect on living in Doña Ana County. it also has an effect, not quite as big, on communities like Silver City and Deming and TRC and Alamogordo. We interact with El Paso in a huge way. And when you look at it that way, we're we kind of have a similarity with maybe Valencia County and South Valley, west side of Albuquerque, maybe even Sandoval County in that respect. Those are communities that interact with a huge city. So that is another commonality. And I think that this particular proposed map does a good job of trying to capture that at least as well, if not better than any other map that you might choose. Thank you.
Mr. Cannon, would you hold on for just a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sandra, Brian or Brittany, could you guys pull up Albuquerque on that map for me? So here, Mr. Quinn, this has been a question before, okay? That because Albuquerque is divided up in 3 ways on this map. Okay, sorry. Because Albuquerque is divided on this particular map, which has been endorsed by a couple of people. So I just wanted to raise it because Albuquerque is divided up. I live over here. And we know what this area is and this area of Albuquerque. This map, don't you worry that all 3 representatives could be from Albuquerque and there wouldn't be any representation for rural New Mexico based on this map.
There you go. That is a risk that I would look forward to taking personally. Just because one particular area happens to have more population than another does not assure that that area is going to be the home of the representative. I refer back to my earlier comment. We have.
Just keep it a little further away from your mouth, that's all.
We have I'll try it this way.
Put it in the mic stand for you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
About 8 or 9 inches is
There you
the
go.
right distance.
We have the largest population area in the current CD2. We haven't done, or we haven't been able to elect a representative from Las Cruces but once in the last 50 years. And it's possible that you may have our representative from the west side of Albuquerque or South Valley. And as I mentioned before, actually for people in Las Cruces and also the communities that surround El Paso, Sunland Park and Anthony and Chaparral and a few other smaller ones, Santa Teresa, we have that population, but we are unable so far to get a representative except for a couple of years ago. But even if we had a representative from South Valley or West Albuquerque, I'm hoping that they might boldly advocate for measures to combat climate change. I'm not holding my breath that anybody from the east side of the state's going to do that for obvious reasons. Their livelihoods are dependent on the production and extraction of fossil fuels. That's just one issue. There are many others where I'm confident that people that live in that area of Albuquerque would see things and represent those communities in a manner that would probably satisfy much of the interests of the people here because they come from a similar community. I'm also hopeful that different people that are interested in office from this area might run and get elected. That'd be great. But we all know that we cannot be guaranteed that our senator or our representative are going to live in the same community. The numbers just don't allow that. So everybody has to take a risk. And in some cases, the likelihood that their senator or representative is going to have to travel. That's a given. You can't avoid that.
I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Next from Zoom, we have Nena Benavides. She's still wanting to speak. Nena?
Let's see, no, she split.
Anybody else on Zoom?
Nobody else
Okay.
on Zoom.
So next we have Commissioner Williams. Would you like to speak, ma'am? She's with the Ethics Commission.
I didn't know who you were talking about, what you said, commission. I forgot. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I'd like to tell you that I have been a resident of Las Cruces, New Mexico for 68 years. And I got here when the sign said, when I came in, welcome to Las Cruces, New Mexico, the home of 18,000 people and a few old soreheads. We met the soreheads interestingly enough, because they were opposed to White Sands Missile Range. And they thought that we would be gone in a few years and they'd be left holding the bag. As it turns out, my family was raised here, and I worked at White Sands Missile Range for 37 wonderful years. I'm very passionate about my family. I'm very passionate about Las Cruces and the state of New Mexico, as well as White Sands Missile Range. So anything that will hurt it in any way, I will be the one to speak out, one of the very loudest ones. We are the sixth most corrupt state in the nation. And how do I know that? Because several years ago, I was interviewed by someone from Bloomberg News in Washington, D.C., who came down to interview Richardson when he was running for governor. He got very interested in the fact that I had blown the whistle on a very corrupt man with regard to housing. And he stayed here 2 days. He did a lot of research and told me that we were the sixth most corrupt state in the nation. In addition, we are 50th in everything: education, poverty, etc. And I know that 33% of the people who live in Doña Ana County live at or below the poverty level. So I am very, very concerned about that. I have been serving on several commissions through the years, and I understand that Lisa is now the head of the Commission for the Status of Women. I was appointed one of the first commissioners by Governor Cargo on the Commission for the Status of Women, and we did a hell of a job. I also want to tell you that I was very honored to be appointed by Senator Pavin, our wonderful senator, to be on the Ethics Commission, the first group of us. And I will tell you, they are doing an outstanding job. Having said all of that, I want to say that as far as how this redistricting is done, I have actually seen and been involved in a redistricting issue in Doña Ana County. And it upset me very much because the person who was in that district serving as a senator made some comments about this particular city, and he would have lost his vote. I was with Governor King when this person who was a senator came down. Governor King came down to help him with his getting reelected. And the people in the city just threw coins at this senator and said, Judas, Judas. The next thing I know is that senator is redistricted out of that town and put in another district so that he could be elected the next time. And I do have a concern with regard to this commission. I know you will do an outstanding job, but I do worry based on my lots of years here in New Mexico and having served in a number of positions which brought me in touch with people who have been in their district for a number of years. And it also is because of gerrymandering the state so that they could stay there. And I blame the corruption a lot on the fact that they stay there and stay there. And therefore, we're not making the progress that New Mexico should be making. I also want to say that as far as this commission, which was established, and I was involved in appointing or helping to appoint 3 that are on here now. I think the way it has been constructed and set up, and I also believe that you will follow the statute to the letter. But I also understand this, that even if you go to every county, and even if you set up the most wonderful redistricting that is as fair as it can be, it goes to the legislature. And if the legislature does not agree with how you have redistricted, I don't know what happens then. But I will tell you this, as someone who has been fighting for so many of the issues in this state, that if the legislature does not agree with what you have done, then there will be hell to pay. I personally have threatened to stand on the steps of the Capitol naked. That would not be a very good sight to see, but that's just how I feel about it. If I have to draw the attention. So my concern is the ethical issues that are involved with what happens on the redistricting. And if it is not accepted by the legislature, I don't know what happens after that. And I don't know if you know either, but that's what I want to say. I applaud what you're doing. I know it's a hard job. And all I can say is God bless you in your mission. But I do worry about the unethical behavior of many of our elected officials in the state, which has kept us at that poverty level and our education over 50 in the nation. That is criminal. Thank you.
Commissioner, I just want to thank you for your service to the state over the years. You and I had a chance to talk, and I know you were on the Commission for the Status of Women in 1974.
Yes.
During a time when, as you and I were talking, women weren't even allowed to will their property if they got that property through a divorce, as they so chose. I mean, it is it is amazing, you know, how our situation, those of us women in this country, have changed because of people like you. And I appreciate you. I know we all appreciate you. And I really, truly thank you for your service. I hope that the current commission, which has just had to start from ground zero over again, as you know, it was defunded by the prior administration. So I hope that we can make the kind of changes that for society now that you made back when you were in that position. So thank you. And I know that this committee is very dedicated to working hard to reach consensus on the maps. Based on what we're hearing from all the citizens that have come before us. And as you know, we take this job very seriously. So I appreciate your statements about the legislature. Democracy is messy, right? And so, so I suppose since this is the first of these committees to be handled by the citizens, as opposed to the legislature initially, we'll see how it goes. But I think your voice is going to be important, so I appreciate you using it today.
I'd also like to add that as a result of the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, New Mexico military had to admit women, and that was quite a fight. But I also would like to ask you a question. What happens if the legislature doesn't agree with what you've done? What happens then?
I will I don't want to step over the chair. The chair wants to.
I'm willing to pass that question on.
Commissioner, the law sets out, what the duties are. And then we draw maps, we make recommendations to the legislature, and the legislature takes it from there. So, I mean, that's the law that was passed. And just on your corruption issue, I'm going to make this statement because I think it's important. Redistricting and the time it's spent in the legislature, the maps that were drawn, the prior governor has been of a different party. Those maps were vetoed. And they ended up in the courts, and the judges drew those maps. All right, that then went to the Supreme Court that made rulings about those maps the judges made. All right, here we have a democratically controlled House, Senate, and executive, and still they passed this law. All right, when they could have run this show. All right, so I think that says something about the changes that have gone on in the legislature. Right, that they formed this committee, they passed this law, and with bipartisan support. So I know that gives me some solace and faith in this system. And I hope it does everyone else.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, thank you for your comments. If it doesn't, if the legislature gets it and they don't use it, maybe we'll all join you on the steps of the roundhouse.
Speak for yourself.
All joking aside, I really, to go along with Member Curtis and what she was saying, I have great confidence that the legislation that was passed to create this was a bipartisan effort. And I really believe that legislators want to see this be successful. And so we're going to work as hard as we can to make it the most successful that we can, so that when they get the maps, if there's changes, there's very slight changes. That's our hope. If not, then we go back to the drawing board and see what we need to do differently. But I really do have that confidence.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you think we can get an answer from Mario Jimenez about the prison population?
Mario is looking at that reference right now, Chair Member Curtis.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'll be happy to share that information with you all if you like. I can email that to you or get you some hard documents, however you would like. But it's information that we put together and compiled in working together with the ACLU and gathering prison data and data within each of those various communities.
If you'd like, post it on our website.
Absolutely, be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Daniel Sanchez.
My name is Daniel Sanchez. I'm an organizer with NM Cafe. My pronouns are he, him, él. I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And more specifically, I live in the Mesilla Park, Tortugas area. I live next to a car wash where every weekend I hear Spanish music ringing from the patrons. I can walk down the street and eat Mexican food from Bravo's Cafe, where you have to be able to speak Spanish to order that food. It's an understood and unspoken rule in our neighborhood. I live 5 minutes away from Mesilla, where the entire economy of the town leans heavy on, on my Hispanic Latino culture. Given my current living experience, I ask, why am I represented by someone that does not look like me? Why haven't Hispanic Latinos had representation for the past 50 years? Why have the district maps been drawn in a way that leaves my people underrepresented? Why have these maps been unchanged for 20 years? I know the answer to these questions. These maps were made with conservatives in mind. Now it's time for radical change. This is why I'm here to ask you to commit to me and my community to present a Congressional District 2 map that gives me and my people the opportunity to elect representatives that represent adult Hispanic Latinos in my community. Representatives that have our interests in mind. Increase the amount of representatives that we have in Congressional District 2. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I urge you to make a positive change for adult Hispanic Latino people in my community.
Questions from the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I know that for me, we really want to know boundaries, where you think those boundaries should be, that you feel would give you the realistic opportunity to have a representative that you feel like would be representing your interests. So I really urge everybody to put maps up.
Yeah.
Because it's important to us. We need to see those. We talk about every map that gets put up on the website. So if you would do that now that we have census numbers in particular, because obviously we're bugging Mr. Sandroff for voter age population data for Voting Rights Act reasons. So if you can look at that, which I'm sure will be up soon, Mr. Sandroff, right? Then we can get these maps. So if you all would commit to us to do that, I promise that we will look really carefully through all of it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes.
Not a question for Mr. Sanchez, but for Mr. Sandroff. What was the Democratic Hispanic population in Doña Ana County or in CD2 in 2010?
Democratic?
I'm sorry, just regular Hispanic population in CD2 in 2010, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have.
Yeah.
Member Sanchez, CD2 Hispanic voting age population in 2010 was 46.9%.
And then the most recent numbers are now increased by?
We only have Doña Ana County, but that's increased from 60.4% to 63%.
And we have the state, 40.
Yeah, and the full state is 44.3 adult Hispanic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Right.
Next, joining us from Zoom is Nena Benavides.
Ms. Benavides.
Good afternoon.
You
Thank
good?
you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nena Benavides. I'm the community organizer in Grant and Hidalgo counties on behalf of New Mexico Cafe. For 6 generations, my family, along with other deeply rooted families, have given our all to see that this community is a place where we can continue to raise our children, honor our elders, and keep our families intact. We seek to uphold the values of mining, ranching, farming, and family. We seek to honor our connections to the vast, beautiful land and skies that surround us. We seek to honor our cultures, languages, and traditions. According to the 2010 census, we know that our community has a Hispanic Latino population of nearly 53%. We anticipate that this population will show growth with the 2020 numbers. We know that CD2 is a majority Hispanic Latino district, but right now with the current mapping, this is not reflected, and therefore the majority is not represented and hasn't been for nearly 50 years. With these things in mind, I feel that it is important for me to be here today to speak on behalf of my community and directly to this committee. It is important to note that the 7-person committee before us does not fully represent New Mexicans of every demographic and fails to include a single representative from Southern New Mexico or a tribal nation. Because of the lack of inclusion, I am asking on behalf of our communities of color that this committee should commit itself to make conscious, clear targets that do not split up Hispanic and Native voters in districts. The Citizens Redistricting Committee should work to maintain or increase the number of majority Hispanic and Native districts in terms of voting age population that we have under current lines. There should be no decrease in majority Hispanic districts from current lines with 2020 census data. There should be no decrease in majority Native districts from current lines with 2020 census data. Too often, traditional redistricting principles only value so-called majority minority districts. The Citizens Redistricting Committee should hold itself to a higher standard by committing not to decrease the number of majority of Hispanic or Native districts. In conclusion, I ask that this committee commit to present a congressional map, especially in CD2, that will represent the majority population, which is Hispanic and Latino. We are asking for the chance, choice, and opportunity to elect the people who best represent us and our community and our communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions from the committee?
Thank you, Ms. Benavides. I had a question for Mr. Sandroff, though. You were able to give us a statewide voting age population percentage for Hispanic voters. Do you have that for Native American voters?
We can run it. I mean, we're running 1,000 things. We can try to run that right now.
And we've also got the CD2 Hispanic numbers. It's 50.8 now. So up from 46.9.
CD2 adult Hispanic.
CD2 adult Hispanic, yep.
Under the current plan?
Under the current plan, right.
50.1?
50.8.
Mr. Senator, I think you mentioned you can before, but with that number, that's VAP, but you are able to determine, or are you able to determine eligible voters? In other words, that includes voting age population, but does it include everyone who is eligible to vote, or only include those eligible to vote is probably a better question.
No, that question wasn't on the census questionnaire, citizenship. There'll be American Community Survey data that will come out eventually, but with sizable sampling error issues.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Chair members, we have 2 more people. Next up is Scott Chandler.
Mr. Chairman, other Committee members, I just want to thank you guys for serving. I know this is a tough job. Sitting here and listening. I've been tuning in on Zoom, following, and there's just so much out there, and there's so many. It's very complex, and I know it's very difficult. But I agree. There's one thing lacking on this committee. There's not a cowboy. And you need one for perspective, but also for that color and entertainment. And if you had a cowboy or cowgirl on there, it would really round it out. But now, all joking aside, when I saw the numbers Brian put up about the counties, it's what made me jump up and come up and say I wanted to say something. And I don't know, could you pull up that real quick first? Your counties with the reduction.
Oh.
But I jotted down a few of them, like Sierra County lost 3.4%, Grant County 4.8%, Hidalgo County 14.6%, Catron reduction of 3.9%, Socorro 7.1% reduction, and Luna County had a plus 1.3%. And I live in Luna County, but I ranch in Sierra County, and I actually have cattle in Hidalgo County, and I've also run cattle up in Valencia County. So, I'm kind of all over, but mostly we're southern based. And, my concern is, and, Brian, I know it was just kind of an off the cuff comment he probably made when he was going through those numbers was like, such a reduction could lead to maybe a sway to put us in a Doñana district or something. I can't remember how exactly he said that. And I know it's just an off the cuff comment, but something like that would be disastrous for an area like us. Just because we've lost population to carve us up and put us, our representatives coming out. There is zero thing we have in common there. And, I would suggest more you go, if you have to change it, you include it up with Catron and maybe Socorro or something would be much more of a rural representation for, the livestock industry, farmers, even small communities such as CRC, Hidalgo. That number in Hidalgo, that just blew me away. And in 2016, I was visiting with the, I guess he's the CFO of the county in Hidalgo. And he told me that they had a 50% gross receipts reduction when they lost their smelter. 50% of their county reduction in gross receipts. So obviously it's not improving down there. Yes, everybody's worried about a lot of things, and I've been listening. You've been asking people issues. I hadn't planned on talking about a lot of issues, but if that chart right there doesn't tell you what issues are, I don't know what does. And if Hidalgo County, just as an example, if in 2016 they lost 50% of their revenue essentially coming into their county, and they're still losing population like that, are we going in the right direction? No, we're going in the wrong direction. And the things that we have are under siege. The livestock industry, I was on the way over here today to this meeting. I came from a county meeting in Luna County, and I was there and they were talking about projects and stuff, and every bit of it depended on federal funds or some sort of grant. We don't pay for anything ourselves anymore. It all comes from somewhere else, which means there's all strings attached to this. We are not the master of our own lands anymore. Someone else is when they're having to pay for all of our improvements, our schools, everything, we don't have a say in it because, if your Uncle Bill's paying your rent, Uncle Bill's going to tell you how to live in your house. We're not becoming the masters of our own destiny, and we're going backwards and people are leaving too. So it's obvious we're not generating jobs. Now, when I was talking to another commissioner from Sierra County on the way over, because a big issue just happened to us on our ranch up by Hillsboro, they just released wolves within 5 miles of my border. He had 20 days notice from the state of New Mexico that they were turning wolves out on the ladder, this county commission. 20 days. Does that sound appropriate to you? That we're given 20 days notice that they're going to do this. And so, yeah, an injunction got filed the day they released them, but the wolves are turned out. If they take us up to 50%, we're gone. I mean, 50% of reduction. Those wolves, if they're taking 50% of our calf crop, we're just out of there. We're already on such slim margins now. How many of you know what cool means? Country of origin labeling. When you go into the grocery store and buy your meat, it says USA made, it is not USA. They can bring meat into this country from all over, anywhere, and repackage it here. As long as they repackage it here, they can put American on it. Do you want that? You don't know how they killed them or how they treated them or what they did, coming all the way from, South America, or, I even heard they were shipping African beef over here now. How can they bring beef cheaper here than we can grow it? They can't. It's called, they're trying to destroy our industry. But we don't have representation to even bring it up. Most people don't even know what that means. I think you as a consumer, it's more important than me as a producer. If I was you as a consumer, I would want to know where my meat comes from. And if you want to buy Argentina beef, great. It should say Argentina beef. But you should have the choice to buy American beef if you want to buy it. But that's representation. And so if we take that map, what was the one the gentleman over here put up? We won't have representation. I agree. All of our representatives out of Albuquerque, and it kind of, I almost felt like you were saying that you didn't say a quote, but it sounded like you were saying, well, that's where the smarter people are going to agree with you for some of those things. I know you graduated from New Mexico State, UNM. I graduated from Western. We're a little further on the western side of the state, but we do get a few smart people over there. And we need to keep these rural communities together. Now, if we allow, because and I sit here and listen to this, all the minority stuff, and I have my sister-in-law's Hispanic. I have a lot of Hispanics in my family. My great-grandmother was born on the Trail of Tears. We go a long ways back. We have I had another grandmother that was Indian, and doesn't mean we're all not so much alike. But you talk about a minority. There's nothing more endangered than the farmer and the rancher. And that's what founded this state. That's like knowing what built you. And then you're just put out to pasture because they're going to turn wolves on you. They're going to let it burn down. I watched in 2013, a quarter of our ranch burned because of mismanagement, because our state doesn't stand up to the feds. And they just let it burn. You know how hard it is to ride up on a hillside and you're standing up there and you're watching all your country burning. There's nothing you can do about it. And they tell you better get out because it's probably going to get your house. The house is the least of our worries. We know our cattle and our livestock, our fences, and everything was being burned. But sometimes we get so far being progressive, we forgot what got us there. My uncle used to tell me when I was a kid growing up in high school, he was like, don't forget who brought you to the dance. You don't take a girl to the dance and then find a better looking girl and leave. He'd beat me for that if I had done that. And I think sometimes we forgot what brought us to the dance. And I'm all for it. I just testified at a county meeting about an algae plant and stuff. I was all for it. Progress, do some good things. Just want to make sure we got enough water. That was my only concern. Do we have enough water so we don't jeopardize the farmers in the area? We need jobs. We need to be bringing in industry, but it needs to be smart stuff. Bringing in a bunch of windmills and covering up all of our counties down there and evaluating our property values, not positive growth. We need to stop politicizing this stuff. I get contacted by people almost weekly, very, poor people in our counties. Because, what I used to do, they're like, Scott, our son, he's in trouble. He's not going to school. What do I do? And I try and give him some number. And they're like, I've already talked to those people. They don't have any help for me. And now he's stealing stuff. He's selling drugs. There's no help for him. that is problems. But if we go just, basing stuff on because, well, we feel like everybody's underrepresented or whatever. Now, I want everybody represented. That's what I want. Everybody represented. All of us. If we all succeed, don't we all win? This isn't about cutting up a pie. Sometimes I feel like we're cutting up a pie. If you take, I guess a good example is just on, our map with 32. And, if you take all that and our Senate map, if you take us and put us in that, with Albuquerque, and we're not out of, district or congressional district 2, who's going to counterbalance us with Albuquerque and Doniana? I think right now, the way District 2 is cut up, maybe, it needs some tweaking, but Doniana, it sounds to me, you said there's 50.8%, Hispanic voters. It's starting to sound like it's pretty balanced. If we take us up and split us over there, and it looks like Doniana counterbalances with Roswell and those areas, if you're looking at it that way. I don't look at things that way. I'm sitting there trying to get all this through my mind. Maybe I'm just a simple cowboy, but I just know we don't have a very large voice already. And if it's not careful to protect what we have, we won't have any voice at all. And there's fewer and fewer of us. I have 5 kids, 1 still at home. 2 live in the state still. One of them is just hanging on living in the state just because she wants to be here. You know how hard it is for my wife, we have to drive all the way to College Station to see our grandkids. It's because there's no jobs here. That statistic here proves it. It's not that we don't want to work hard. It's just there's not the opportunity here. So, I know maybe I'm a little too passionate, but we need to take a lot of the emotion. I'm getting up here, I'm being an emotional guy. It's kind of funny for a cowboy, huh? But some of this stuff, there's a little too much emotion in, and let's just do the right thing. And I think if we just go carving and we're going to have some real zigzaggy lines, and we just need to be very careful what we do. Anyway, I don't know if you guys wanted all that, but I gave it to you. So.
Well, frankly, I think the committee was concerned we may not hear enough from the farm and livestock and ranching community. And this is the first day really that we've heard a lot about it. We had New Mexico Livestock Farm Bureau talk to us, and that's important. So I appreciate what you've had to say. And I do think we have to remember our roots.
Are y'all aware that right now, I was in Deming today and I saw hay trucks coming from the south. There is trucks coming from Mexico hauling cartel hay into America. This is a fact. And it's destroying our hay farming in this. I don't grow hay. I have hay farmer friends. But they buy the farms, and the cartel buys the farms in Mexico. They put it in hay. They drive it in. They pull up to a dairy. They don't already have a contract. They just pull in and say, what will you give us for it? And they usually, 50% of what is being contracted for up here. Then they deposit that in a Wells Fargo account. Money laundered. They don't care if they're getting $50 a ton if, when it's costing $150 up here, because now it's legal money for them. But, and that's a bad thing. But the thing to me that's is horrible is I have friends who are hay farmers, they're going out of business because they can't compete with that. So there's a lot of things I don't think people really realize. And that's because, for one, there's not someone to get up there and go and say the tough things. Sometimes, you tell people that and they're like, oh my gosh, why are you telling that? But it's true. Investigate it. I can get you into a group of rural farmers that'll tell you that. And so that's why it's important that, we have, and I did, I got Yvette in a room full of those guys. I was able to get her in there. We may be in Denny, she's over there and long ways off Alamogordo, but she came over to Luna County and sat there. So those guys could tell her that. And I appreciated that.
Mr. Chandler, can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So Hidalgo County has lost like 32% of its population in the past 20 years, according to what was up there.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand you saying that county lost a smelting.
Yeah, back in like around 2000, something like that.
So that other drop, the 14% or whatever that's happened in the last 10 years, what would you attribute that to?
Well, some of them were the hanger-ons, I guess, they either transferred up to the Silver City mine and commuted up there to work, to finish out. Some just retired and their kids, went ahead and grew up and then they just left. And then so you follow your grandkids off, whatever. And also, they had like the federal that took over, it's escaping my mind, man. I hit 50 years old, my mind's just gone. But the town that ran the smelter, it had a federal deal come in and there was some service stuff going and that thing goes up and down. I mean, my understanding is the feds don't pay any taxes on that when they have it. The mine paid taxes on it. But it did create a few jobs, but it goes ups and down as they ramp up to do their special ops or helicopter training, whatever they're doing over there. But a lot of it is there's so much despair in that county. People are just leaving in droves. And, and honestly, the agriculture, you go over there and look at the farming, most of it's fallow ground. They left long ago because there's just no money in it.
So the reality of the population loss in Hidalgo County and for those representative districts, I'm not going to talk about the congressional districts because I don't know what that means yet, but as far as your House and Senate districts, right, it means that your boundary is going to have to grow around Hidalgo County, and I wanted to know if you had an opinion.
That's why I said I'd go a little more north. Sorry, don't want to interrupt. I would go up then. If it was up to me, I mean, I don't speak for any of the cattlemen associations. I know they just get on and kind of tell it general stuff. But if it was me, I would go up into Catron, Socorro in that area if you were going to have to, expand up. Because if we get over more into Doniana, we just get out of our element there. And, it makes for a pretty big district there, but I would go up. That's a lot more similar interests, similar. I mean, and I noticed some of them, lost population growth. So maybe if you lump us all together, we kind of make it up. I don't know. That's my suggestion. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Do you have another question for Mr. Chandler? Okay. Eva Woods had her hand up on Zoom. Eva, do you want to address the committee?
Ms. Woods, please indicate by putting your hand up if you'd like to speak. Otherwise, don't worry about it.
All right, so next we go to Senator Hamlin in the room.
My last one?
Yes, ma'am. Unless Eva comes back around.
Okay.
Ms. Woods.
All right, thank you, everybody. My name is Carrie Hamlin, and I am the Senator for District 38. My pronouns are she, her. I appreciate the conversations today, and I appreciate all the voices that have been heard. I'm not going to talk about specific maps. It's a very new process to me as a new senator, as part of a freshman class of 9 new senators in the legislature. But what I have been seeing is that we need to change our democratic system to reflect the people of New Mexico. And I think we have a couple of steps. And I think the first step is what you are posed with, the challenge today. And that is to use thoughtful and equitable redistricting. Having congressional representation that favors and includes Albuquerque is the map that you had pointed out to earlier, in a race that impacts our state and especially our region, I think is actually a ridiculous idea. I have no reason to believe that anybody in Albuquerque would understand what people in Chaparral, what people in the colonias, what people in the rural parts of southern New Mexico actually need and want. And so I do feel that needs to stay as its own congressional district. Albuquerque is a completely different beast than southern New Mexico, than eastern New Mexico, western New Mexico, or northern New Mexico. But I also feel that our second step in doing this, and you're really kind of given the first step of this, and we will be able to have a say in that in the special session that deals with redistricting. But one of the things that I've noticed the most is that we are notoriously bad at embracing and uplifting Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities in the political process. And those communities are the majority of our state. As some folks have already talked about, ignoring those communities is disregarding the generations of hard work and contributions to the state that we all have loved today. We also need to start paying our legislators, because 95% of our state cannot participate in creating policy and law unless you're independently wealthy, retired, or you have a job that allows you to do so. We have people who are working 2 to 3 jobs to support their families, and they cannot contribute, they cannot participate in policy and law because we don't do that. But that's not your job. That's going to be our job and the state of New Mexico's job. But the fact that we are not allowing 95% of our state to be able to participate in policy and law, I think is blatantly discriminatory. Lastly, we have to recognize that we as a collective, as a state rich with culture and amazing spirit, can help each other. We've talked about this north-south divide. I had it addressed in one of my committee meetings where somebody suggested that the north can help the south. Well, those of us who are here in the south feel that we don't really need help, that we can contribute to our state as a collective, that the south can help the north, the east can help the west can help the east. And so we have to really work on this north-south divide. But I also feel that we have incredible people in our southern communities, farmers and farm workers. We have business owners, leaders in outdoor recreation, which is where we really focus as well and excel. We have social justice champions that we've heard from today, academics, and we have public servants who are committed to helping improve their communities. There was the dance metaphor that was used earlier, and I'm not really good at cliches. I mess them up on a regular basis, but the conversation was, don't forget who we go to the dance with. But I think what we really need to remember is who is throwing the dance party. And that is the Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities that have been here long before many of our families have. I feel like New Mexicans deserve a fully representative democracy, but we have to remove those barriers that have existed for decades that prohibit equal representation in changing our state. The first step is to make that happen, and it's by doing right by our residents, by having proper redistricting. I commend you for your service. I don't envy you at all, and I look forward to what your results are. And thank you for your time, and thank you for being here today.
Questions for the senator? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just more thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Justice Chavez members, there are 2 more folks. People are keeping me honest. We have Mr. Lee Peters, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Lee Peters. I live west of Las Cruces. Luis Terrazas is my representative. Crystal Diamond is my senator. She lives in Elephant Butte. He lives in Silver City. I don't feel very well represented, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm very happy to be here, speak to this group. It's chaired by our wonderful former Chief Justice, Ed Chavez, who I've known since my wife and he clerked for our own Las Cruces' own deceased Dan Sosa, who was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Anyway, my comments are directed toward the congressional districts, and I have not reviewed the maps. I like the map that came up a while ago, but basically in New Mexico, and we have had for years, 3 congressional districts that are pretty well locked in as to who's going to represent them. All 3 districts. Now I grew up in Santa Fe. I left there when I was 33, moved to Las Cruces. I've been here now 33 years. And I lived in Albuquerque when I went to school at that other school for 7 years, including law school. So I've lived in all 3 congressional districts, and I know the state pretty well. I've been well traveled around the state. But all 3 districts are pretty well locked in, except for a few exceptions, like when we had Social Torres Small here from Las Cruces representing CD2 for 2 years. And my comments go more toward not the criteria that you laid out, but more toward the fundamental issue of representative democracy. And I would appreciate the committee recommending and taking into account
that we need more competitive congressional districts in the state. CD2 needs to be more competitive. CD1 needs to be more competitive. CD3 needs to be more competitive. Now, doing that while reaching all that criteria and keeping communities together, particularly like keeping Albuquerque as its own district, even though Albuquerque is much larger than one congressional district now. That's going to be difficult. Dividing up Albuquerque and potentially giving Albuquerque 3 congresspeople, that's something may happen. But the people of New Mexico deserve to elect people based on the merits of their positions and the things that they will do for New Mexico and represent New Mexico in Congress. And when the districts are locked in because you have a huge Democratic majority in CD2 or 3, CD1, and you have a very conservative majority voting in CD2, that's not going to happen. All 3 of those districts could be made competitive between the candidates, with the candidates being judged on their merit, rather than being determined by what voting bloc exists in that congressional district. And that's my point. I will try and submit a map or concur with one of the maps that's been submitted. I've been working on a lot of the demography for years. Brian was a law school classmate of mine, but he left to do something a lot more fun. So I'll help out and submit a map, but that's my point, and it goes to the heart of representative democracy. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Vee.
And Mr. Chair, excuse me, we do have some numbers on the Native American change over the decade. So in 2010, this is adult non-Hispanic Native American, it was 7.9. And in the 2020 census, it was 8.4.
And what about the Hispanic Native American? Do you have that? Does that alter?
I don't have that, but
Okay.
we could look at that. Thank you.
Will you repeat that, please?
Yes, 2010 adult non-Hispanic Native American was 7.9. 2020 adult non-Hispanic Native American 8.4.
Thank you, Brittany.
Next, we have James Kogawa.
I'm short. I need to bring this down a little bit. But good afternoon, committee members, Justice Chavez. I'm James Kogawa, and I'm the policy director for the Center for Civic Policy. And I'm also a tribal member of Okeo Pueblo. I'm also Hispanic. So I'm there for your demographic justice that you just asked about. And, you know, I just wanted to make a few comments, and I know I'm the last person to speak today, but in particular, New Mexico has for a long time been a majority minority state. And the reality is that Hispanic and at the very beginning, Native American people are the ones that founded communities in this state. And we deserve to be able to, for instance, with congressional districts, be able to select candidates that look like ourselves, to have representation that look like ourselves and come from our communities. We're learning that from the census, our country has become more diverse. And the reality is that it's going to continue to be that way, which is good for our nation. And it was also mentioned that CD2 is at 50.8% Hispanic population. The reality is we should be pushing for more. I encourage you to draw maps with around the congressional districts to think about going to 60% Hispanic, 60% Native American. And I am very excited for you all to be hearing from leadership from Native American communities. You heard from folks in Farmington last week, I believe. And on Saturday, you'll be at the All Public Council of Governors, where you will hear from leadership there and community members. And that's all I have to say, and thank you so much for all of your service.
Questions? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is there anybody else who didn't put a star by your name, but you've been listening, you're inspired, you'd like to be heard? Going once, going twice, already checked in with the folks in silver. Anybody on Zoom, Sunny?
Nobody on Zoom.
All right.
Ryan Silver,
Nope.
Michael Sanchez,
Mr. Chairman, before I close, I just want to also thank the state police who have been with us at all of the different hearings. They should sit patiently back there and just appreciate them being here. So thank you very much. With that, Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are.